The most beautiful woman in the eastern region was dying in my arms, and technically, it was my fault, not the poison. The poison was the dragon's fault. But the reason we were in a cave 2 miles under a forbidden mountain hunting a dragon in the first place was me. So when her skin started going the color of old jade and her breathing turned into something you'd hear from a broken bellows, I did the math and landed on my fault and just sat with it. Her name, you should probably know the name of the woman you're watching me get half killed over, was Bai Yongxi, my master. Sect master of the profound spirit sect, cultivated to the soul transformation realm in 800 years, which around here is the kind of thing they carve on mountains. The eastern region liked to call her one of the 8 great beauties, and the eastern region for once was underselling it. Cold face, warm eyes, the sort of woman who could kill you with a glance and then feel bad about the mess, and she was dying because a flood dragon's core had ruptured in her hand. We'd come for a cure, not for her, for me. That was the part that made my teeth hurt. She dragged her half-dead disciple into the ancient forbidden zone on a rumor of a healing fruit, fought a dragon 2 realms above anything sane, won, and gotten a lungful of its dying poison for the trouble, the core toxin. If it wasn't purged within 1 hour, it wouldn't kill her. It would do something worse, twist her cultivation inside out until the most beautiful woman in the eastern region became a screaming thing that clawed her own meridians apart. 1 hour. We were maybe 40 minutes in. Master, I said, there's a way. No. She didn't even open her eyes. I know that way. Find another. See, here's the ugly little secret of dragon core poison, the kind of thing they don't put in the cultivation manuals because the manuals are written by people who blush. It's a yang toxin, pure, violent, masculine fire. And the only thing in this world that neutralizes it fast enough is its opposite, a deep bond of yin and yang energy, passed between a man and a woman who trust each other down to the root, dual cultivation. A joining of 2 cores so complete that her poison could bleed into me and burn out clean. A man and a woman, trust down to the root. And the only man in this cave was the disciple she'd raised since he was 8 years old. Master. I made my voice as steady as I could, which was not very. You have 38 minutes. After that, there's no more choosing. So let me choose for both of us. It's me or it's a mountain full of dead god poison. Pick the one that keeps you a person. Her eyes opened. And I want to be honest about this because I've never lied about it to myself and I won't start now. I meant every word. And I also knew exactly what I was doing. Both things. At the same time. That's just the shape of me. I love this woman like she was the whole sky, and I was also a man who had spent 100 years being told he was going to die, and some cold clockwork part of my brain looked at the situation and thought, this is a door, and it is open, and it will not be open twice. So yeah, I talked my master into it. I'd like to tell you I agonized. Mostly I made sure the barrier around the pool was solid. 2 hours later, the cave was full of the smell of spring. Her color was back, the poison was gone, and Bai Yongxi was staring at the ceiling like it had personally betrayed her. You, she said. You little wolf cub. At worst, I offered, I'll just marry you later, fix the whole problem. She flicked me in the forehead hard enough to leave a mark and said nothing, which I filed away as a maybe. Now, you're probably wondering how a dying disciple ended up as the emergency cure for his own master, so let me give you the short version, and I do mean short, because my whole life up to this cave was basically a countdown timer with good manners. I wasn't born here. I drowned once, in another world, pulling a kid out of a river. Kid lived, I did not. 10 out of 10 would do it again. 0 out of 10 stars for the drowning. Then I woke up as a baby in the Luo clan of this world, a cultivation family with real teeth, and it turned out reincarnation comes with a gift receipt. I was a prodigy, reading the flow of spiritual energy at 3. The clan's brightest star before I lost my baby teeth. The day before my 8th birthday, someone slaughtered the entire Luo clan. I survived exactly one reason. I'd snuck out to buy my mother a birthday gift. I came home to a mountain of the people who'd made me, and a shadow standing over the last of them, turning toward the little boy in the doorway. That's the last thing I remember before the world went white. And then Bai Yongxi came down out of that white like a blade, killed the thing, knelt in the ash in front of an orphan, and asked, "Child, would you like to come with me?" I've followed her ever since, 6th disciple of the profound spirit sect. And for a while, the universe seemed to feel bad about the whole massacre thing, because it let me be good. Foundation establishment at 14. Golden core at 40, youngest in the recorded history of the Eastern region. Nascent soul at 120. By 180, I was the #1 prodigy the region had, the pride of the sect, the older brother 1,000 junior disciples looked up to. Then, on an expedition 100 years ago, a figure I never saw clearly reached out and broke me. Not killed, broke. My Tao foundation crumbled like wet chalk, nascent soul crashing all the way down to the very bottom. Foundation establishment, the toddler shallows of cultivation. I'd have died right there if my third granduncle hadn't shattered his own foundation to drag me out. A century in seclusion after that. A century of every master in the sect scattering across the continents hunting a cure that didn't exist, of being the trash who used to be a genius, of a lifespan burning down to its last inch. 1 year. That's what I had left. That morning we walked into the forbidden zone. 1 year to live. So when I say I saw an open door in that cave and walked through it, understand, I'd been standing in a hallway of locked ones for 100 years. And then, right there on the cave floor, with my master pretending to meditate and me pretending not to grin, a voice went off inside my skull that was not mine. Ding. It actually said ding, out loud, in my head, in the smug little chime of every convenience store door I ever walked through in my first life. Congratulations, host. Awakening conditions met. The All Heavens Lux system is now online. I sat very still, because I want you to know something. I had been calling for a system since I was a baby. Every reincarnated soul from my old world knows the legend. You wake up in a cultivation world, a golden cheat unfolds in your head, and you speedrun the heavens. I'd been screaming into the void for one since I could form the thought. 300 years of nothing, and it picks now. Ding. Where? I said very calmly in my head. Have you been? System was always present, dear host. System unlocks only when the host, through his own strength and character, makes a daughter of destiny come to depend on him. Congratulations on your first. A panel bloomed over Bai Yungxi's oblivious head like a price tag on the moon. Bai Yungxi, daughter of destiny, age 800, soul transformation, early, physique, innate 5 elements, host dependence, 10%, 10%. I'd literally saved her life and cured her poison and offered marriage, and I was sitting at 10%. I felt that number in my soul. Here is how you are going to stop dying, dear host, the system went on, chipper as a landlord raising rent. Function is simple. You win a daughter of destiny's complete love and dependence. Her devotion converts to luck points. Luck points repair your ruined body, rebuild your realm, and buy, from the system shop, techniques, pills, and treasures beyond anything this dung heap of a region has ever seen. My body's ruined? Physique, chaos, divine demon body. A tiny, reverent pause, the first genuine emotion the thing ever showed. One of the 3 most powerful physiques in all creation, dear host. Currently damaged. Currently repaired, 2%. 2% of one of the 3 strongest bodies in existence, so functionally a very expensive brick. And the catch, I said, because there's always a catch. My old world taught me that, and this one carved it into stone. Win one daughter of destiny to 100% dependence within 1 year, the system said pleasantly, or system force unbinds, and this conversation never happened. Succeed, and she is bound to you for life, your physique and realm fully restored, and your reward is the chaos yin-yang scripture. 1 hour of cultivation worth 10 days of anyone else's. 1 year. The exact number the healers had given me to live. Somewhere out there the universe was laughing, and it wasn't even trying to hide it. Now, and this is the important part, the part I need you to hear before you decide what kind of man I am, my very first thought was the ugly one. If it runs on her dependence, I thought, then I just make her depend on me. Push, manipulate, corner a grieving woman who thinks I'm dying and squeeze the number to 100. That will not work, dear host, the system said, reading me like a cheap scroll. Dependence is not obedience. It is not fear or debt or a clever trap. It is the real turning of a real heart, earned by your strength, your character, and yes, your charm. God help her. Force it and it falls, not rises. You cannot cheat your way into being loved. You can only be worth it. Well, that was inconvenient, and I'll admit, a little bit of a relief. So I did the only thing a reasonable dying man with a brand new cheat and a rapidly complicating relationship with his master could do. I got poisoned on purpose. It wasn't even hard, honestly. Turns out, when you purge yang toxin into a partner, some of it comes back, secondhand, and I helpfully recycled a lungful. Master, I said, grey-faced and tragic, dragging her toward the spring pool. You wouldn't want my lifespan running out over something we could fix right now, would you? She looked at me with the exact expression of a woman who knows she is being played and cannot find the lie. Then she kicked me into the water and pulled a barrier over the pool. Dependence, 10 to 20. Then a third time, and 20 to 30. And somewhere in there, floating in that pool with the most beautiful woman in the eastern region refusing to look at me, we struck the deal that would run my whole life from that day forward. When your realm catches up to mine, she said, quiet, staring at the water, I'll be your Tao companion. Truly, I promise. She meant it as a kindness. I knew that even then. She was comforting a boy she was certain would be dead within the year, handing him an impossible promise the way you'd hand a dying child the moon, safe in the knowledge he'd never live to collect. Her heart was breaking as she said it. I could hear it. I took it as a contract, because I wasn't going to be dead within the year. I had a landlord in my skull now, and a 2% god body, and a door standing open, and 100 years of being called trash burning in my chest like a second core. She'd promised, and I intend to make people keep their promises to me, even her, especially her. Dependence at 30%, the system announced. Newbie gift pack unlocked. Enjoy, dear host. I climbed out, found a rock to hide behind. A man needs privacy to have a nervous breakdown of joy, and opened it. Small heaven-mending pill. Swallowed it. My physique went from a 6% brick to a 46% something that could actually hold cultivation. My meridians knitting shut a century of scars in the space of a breath. Second stage rejuvenation pill. For growing back what I'd lost. A heaven-stealing talisman. Hides your true realm from anyone below an immortal. Shows them only what you want them to see. I filed that one under the single most useful piece of paper ever printed. And celestial protection. A passive shield that eats 15 minutes of any fatal blow once a month. Which I would very much need later, but that's a scene we'll get to when we get to it. I swallowed the rejuvenation pill too, tore the talisman, called up the shield, and felt my cultivation surge from foundation establishment early straight to late in the space it takes to gasp. Not high, not even close to what I'd been, but real, mine, climbing. And I'm not ashamed to tell you I sat behind that rock and cried like an idiot. 100 years of he's going to die, of pitying looks, of an entire sect scattering to the corners of the world to buy their dying prodigy one more season, and it was over. I wasn't trash. I wasn't a countdown. I was a man with a future again, and the future was going up. The problem was, my master had come to the exact opposite conclusion. Because Bai Yunxi felt the yang bond restore a sliver of my foundation, did some quiet math of her own, and decided, with the grim tenderness of a woman planning a funeral, that if she couldn't cure me herself, she would at least make sure I didn't die alone and unloved. She would bring her own female disciples home, my senior sisters. And she would offer them to me, one after another, as dual cultivation partners, so that the dying boy could have a little warmth and maybe, leave the world in air. She thought she was giving me a soft place to die. She had no idea she'd just started feeding candidates, one peerless beauty at a time, into a machine in my head that turned love into luck, and luck into a man who was about to stop dying and start winning. Return to the sect, she told me, brisk and bright and heartbroken, sending word ahead to 2 of my sisters. There are people you should see, while there's time. Yes, master, I said. And behind my calm little disciple face, the landlord in my skull went ka-ching. The profound spirit sect that I came home to was not a healthy sect. It was a sect that had spent 100 years killing itself to keep me alive. You have to understand what that means. A cultivation sect guards its gate the way a body guards its heart. Ours had been standing wide open for a century because 80% of every master strong enough to matter had scattered across the continents chasing a cure that didn't exist. The old ancestor himself had walked off to some far corner of the world, hunting medicine, and not come back. All of it for one crippled disciple. It's the single most reckless thing I've ever seen a sect do, and they did it for me, and I have never once figured out how to deserve it. So when the great Forbidden Zone gate opened and the sentries saw me walk out beside Master with my foundation visibly restored, the entire mountain lost its mind. They mobbed me. Disciples I'd carried on my back when they were children, grown now and gray at the edges, pushing forward with cupped hands full of life-extending treasures, pills they'd hoarded for decades, each one a small fortune, each one held out to me like it might buy one more season. Senior brother, take mine, take mine. I told them it was useless to me now, which was true, and which every single one of them heard as the dying man being brave. Half of them started crying. It was the worst welcome home party in history, and I loved every second of it, and I couldn't tell them why. Master hauled me off to the back mountain before the sobbing could organize into a funeral, and quietly sent word to recall the roaming supreme elders. Xiaoyu has emerged from seclusion, and then she made her move. 2 of my senior sisters got a summons that day. Come home. There's little time. I want to be fair to her because what she did next broke my heart even while it was making me rich. In seclusion, I refined the rejuvenation pill. Over 10 days, a golden bead the size of a pigeon's egg condensed in my dantian, my golden core, reforged, and this time shot through with a noble streak of purple, stronger than the one I'd lost. A century to climb back to a realm I'd owned at 40. I thanked the landlord. The landlord reminded me I still owed it a body. When Master examined me, she went pale. My meridians were whole, that she could see. But my dantian, my sea of qi, had become a churning fog of chaos her divine sense couldn't read at all. The heaven-stealing talisman, doing its work. Even my own master could no longer see through my realm. She stared at the fog where my cultivation should be, and, because she is brilliant and 800 years old and had exactly one wrong assumption in her head, she blushed and decided it must be a side effect of us. of the cave. Then she hugged me and cried into my shoulder about 100 years of the whole sect holding its breath, terrified I'd end like Chung Li, a disciple of hers who hadn't made it, and I stood there being lied about in the kindest possible way and hugged her back and said nothing. Because here is the thing I'd already figured out, and it sat in my chest like a swallowed coal. Master wasn't summoning my sisters to share a husband. She was summoning them to give a dying boy a little warmth before the end. She was arranging my consolation prize. She had no intention of ever keeping that poolside promise. She thought she'd be keeping a graveside vigil instead. Fine. She'd promised. I'd hold her to it when my realm caught hers. And I'd start by being very, very hard to bury. That was the plan. Then several hundred cultivators landed at our front gate, and not one of them had come to propose. Officially, they were more suitors. Bai Yongxi's hand had become the region's favorite rumor, and men had been showing up to try their luck for weeks. But Master looked down at this particular crowd and frowned, because these weren't lovesick fools. Half were already married. A quarter were old men, and all of them were looking at the gate the way wolves look at a fence they suspect is about to fall. They'd come to find out whether the crippled prodigy had recovered, and leading them in red was an old friend, and manhwa, number 10 of the Nether Sect's 10 great prodigies, 400 years old, real blood on her hands. She'd once killed a cultivator a full stage above her, so no one's toy. The Nether Sect is our oldest enemy, one of the 8 great sects, 100,000 miles north, and she had a personal reason to be first through our gate. 100 years ago, she'd tried to scheme her way into a marriage claim on me, a whole clumsy plot to trap the sect's golden boy into owing her his name, and I turned her down flat, in public, in front of every single person whose opinion she cared about. She has called that the worst humiliation of her life every day since. She'd dressed for the occasion, and she'd rehearsed her line. "Look at you," she said, sweeping up the steps in red, pitching it for the crowd. "The great Luo Zhou. 100 years of an entire sect groveling to keep one cripple breathing, and here he is at the end of it, propped on his master's arm, waiting to die. I came a very long way to watch. I do hope it takes a while." I looked right through her, at the middle distance, and said to nobody in particular, 100 years, and she's still a shrew. I probably shouldn't have. Reopening that old wound in public turned her face the exact color of her dress and put a tremble in her hands that the whole gate saw. But I have never once been able to resist, and honestly neither can you, or you wouldn't still be sitting here listening to me tell it. Another disciple filled the silence by explaining loudly that I was useless trash who hid behind other people's skirts. He got about that far. Bai Yongxi didn't raise her voice. She raised one finger, and the golden core disciple who'd been talking came apart into a fine red mist that drifted off on the mountain wind. The silence after that was the good kind, the kind with everyone's heartbeat in it. "My disciple," she said into the quiet, "is not a topic for your mouth. That's my master. Warm eyes. I told you." They set up a duel to save face because a soul transformation sect master turning children to mist is bad for everyone's mourning. Their side put up Luo Fen, number 8 of the 10 prodigies. Our side put up Zhou Kai. You don't know Zhou Kai yet, so I once had 10 followers, back when I was the sect's shining prince. 7 of them left the day I fell. I don't blame them, or I've mostly stopped. And 3 stayed through the whole rotting century, and Zhou Kai is the biggest, quietest, most stubborn of the 3. Being my follower used to be the most coveted post in the sect, because I never collected servants, only talents. Zhou Kai is a talent. He and Luo Fen were both Golden Core middle, and the first 3 exchanges rang out dead even, which should have been impossible. A mere follower of the fallen cripple trading blows with a top 10 prodigy of the Nether Sect. The crowd started to mutter. Then Luo Fen cheated the odds the way cultivators always do the moment the honest math turns against them, pulled a spirit sword out of his ring, a low-grade one, worth a clean 20% edge, and started grinding my quiet follower down blow by patient blow. Zhou Hai set his jaw and ate it and would not step back, but you cannot outstubborn a weapon, and the crowd's mutter began sliding toward that pitying sound I'd spent 100 years learning to hate, so I tossed my own sword into the ring. "Kai, take this." Mine was top grade. Zhou Kai caught it out of the air without looking and bonded with it in the space of one breath. That's the talent talking, the thing that made him my follower and not somebody's errand boy. And the duel inverted so fast that Luo Fen, number 8 of the Nether Sect's 10 great prodigies, never felt the floor leave his feet. 3 exchanges to take the initiative back, 3 more to settle the argument. On the 6th, he went out over the lake in a long, flat arc and came down 100 meters from shore, spitting water, alive for precisely one reason, that Zhou Kai keeps the rules of a duel even when the man who raised him can't be bothered to. When Kai tried to hand the sword back, I told him to keep it. A Golden Core congratulations gift. The old disciples in the crowd made a sound I hadn't heard in 100 years, that specific awe, because in the good days the surest sign you were a real prodigy was that Luo Zhou had once handed you a treasure like it was nothing. For 1 second I was that person again. It felt like putting on a coat I thought I'd burned. Up in the main hall meanwhile, the 3 people who'd raised me were quietly tearing at an old scar. 3 grand elders. Feng Tianyun, gray robe, a face like a kind farmer, once the sect master, and Bai Yongxi's own master, which makes him my grand teacher. Mei Lihua, white hair, blue robe, fierce and loving in the same breath. And Li Heng, black robe, cold, the second seat, and the one man in the sect who'd said out loud what a lot of people only thought a century ago, that pouring the entire sect's fortune into a doomed cripple was madness. Hundreds of disciples dead in the search, resources enough to raise 10 nascent souls. Burned. The spirit-gathering array itself run dry for one boy. He'd lost one of his own disciples in that hunt. He wasn't cruel, he was keeping a ledger, and the ledger said I was a bad investment. Mei Lihua told him that if he was afraid of dying, he could go home and grow sweet potatoes. Feng Tianyun kept the peace, and underneath the argument was the thing none of them would say, that they'd all watched me grow up, and not one of them could stand in a room and calmly watch me die, ledger or no ledger. Then they felt the disturbance at the gate and vanished toward it, still not finished with a fight 100 years old. Down at the gate, their number 5 prodigy tried to salvage some face. Shu Qingdu, the strongest of the nether contingent present, stepped forward and offered me a duel, magnanimously. I'll suppress my realm all the way to Foundation Establishment, he announced to the crowd, so it's a fair fight and no one can accuse me of bullying a cripple. Generous of him. So I did the arithmetic on him out loud, the way he'd wanted it done to me. Foundation, to match me. How thoughtful. Tell me, how long have you been stuck at Golden Core? A pause. 60 years, he admitted. 60 years to climb one small realm, I said. And they still call you one of the 10 great prodigies of the Nether sect. I fell from nascent soul to the bottom of the ladder in a single afternoon 100 years ago, and I still wouldn't trade my worst day for your best one. Sit down before you embarrass the people who raised you. Another of his juniors filled the silence by calling me trash, and my master, who was genuinely, thoroughly having a day, turned that one to mist as well, and the Nether sect's Grand Elder Han Yueming had to sit there and swallow every bit of it, because you do not raise a hand to a soul transformation sect master over a few dead children, however badly you want to. And into the middle of all that dust and death, a woman in pink came down out of the sky, and my whole complicated life got one beautiful complication heavier. Lin Yuexi, my second senior sister, 20-something to look at, 380 in fact, one of the region's 8 beauties, gentle as warm water. She landed, took one look at me, and a panel unfurled over her head that made my new landlord purr. Lin Yuexi, daughter of destiny, age 380, golden core, late, physique, exquisite immortal body, dependence, 0, 0. She'd come racing home to comfort a dying boy and she was starting from 0, and I felt the number like a personal insult and also like a door. Another door. My whole life had become doors. There was guilt in it. I hadn't even sorted things with Master, and here I was already reading the price tag on my second sister. I want that on the record. I felt it. I noted it. And I got to work anyway, because a coward with 1 year to live is just a corpse with good manners, and I was done being either. The ancestors swept us up to Qingquan Peak, Feng, Mei, and Cold Li stepping straight out of empty space, Mei Lihua bulldozing the 20 trespassing sects off the mountain, He Jin peeling away to spar Han Yueming so the grown-ups could stop the children from fighting. And up on the quiet peak, I finally had to explain to the 3 people who loved me most why the dying boy wasn't dying. We'd agreed on a lie, Master and I, a miracle spirit fruit in the Forbidden Zone. They examined me, confirmed it, and Feng Tianyun, the kind farmer, the man who'd bet the whole sect on me and spent 100 years watching the bet go bad, put his face in his hands and wept, saying over and over that heaven wouldn't treat his sect like this after all. Even Li Heng, vindicated against for once in his cautious life, just stood there stunned. Lin Yuexi threw herself onto me, sobbing that they wouldn't let me die, not knowing I'd already handled it, not knowing I was standing there doing arithmetic on her heart. I'm not proud of the arithmetic. I'm just not going to pretend it wasn't happening. Then Master took Lin Yuexi aside and told her the plan, be his companion, heal him, give the poor boy some peace, and my gentle second sister turned herself into a doting little attendant overnight. Tea, peeled grapes, shoulders rubbed, and I did the only honorable, dishonorable thing available. I made her fall in love with me on purpose, and I did it with the truest lines I had. Because the system had been clear, dependence isn't a trick, it's a real heart really turning, so I couldn't fake it. I had to mean it, so I told her the true things. 300 years old, and I'd never held a woman's hand, never loved anyone. 100 years watching everyone I owed burn themselves down for me while I could do nothing. The unpaid debts, the family I couldn't save, all of it real, all of it aching, all of it aimed like an arrow, and every word of it true. That's the horror and the mercy of the thing my life became. I could only win by being honest, so I became a devastatingly honest man on purpose. She took my hand. When I asked her, quiet, whether she'd be angry if she ever found out I'd lied to her about something, she said, "You'd have your reasons. You'd never hurt me." And the coal in my chest flared, and I hardened around it, and I kept going. That's who I am. I'd rather tell you straight than have you find it in the small print. And then, of course, my first senior sister arrived, because the universe was in a mood. Bai Xiun. White dress, a face they called the female bodhisattva, cold as a mountain lake, an abandoned child who'd taken master's surname out of worship, the single most talented disciple the sect ever raised, another of the 8 beauties. Panel, daughter of destiny, age 400, nascent soul. Early, innate glazed sacred body, a pure Tao heart that breaks every realm below the immortal, like walking downhill. Dependence, 0. 3 daughters of destiny, and all 3 were people I already knew, already loved, already tangled with. My head throbbed. Somewhere the landlord was doing a little dance. Bai Xiun doesn't waste words. As a girl, she'd once hauled a full-grown black bear home because I'd offhandedly said bear paw was tasty. She handed me a storage ring stuffed with priceless life-extending medicine she'd picked up here and there, scanned me. I let the talisman drop for 1 heartbeat so she'd see the truth. And the coldest woman on the mountain broke into a smile so sudden and so childlike it stopped my heart and yanked me into a fierce, silent hug, whispering that even the heavens have their moments of sense. Lin Yuexi walked in on that. There was a very tense 3 seconds. Then everybody blushed, and we all had fish soup. Over the soup, I learned that Master had summoned both my sisters and told them to sort it out between themselves who would be the one to comfort the dying boy. Which is how I finally understood all the way down. She wasn't offering to share me. She was arranging my hospice. She meant to hand me off gently to a sister and step back forever, and never once collect on a promise she was sure would die with me. That one hurt. I'm not going to dress it up. It hurt in a specific private place, and I took the hurt and set it down next to the coal and made myself a quiet promise of my own. When my realm catches yours, Master, you don't get to cheat. Not you. Especially not you. The sisters, for the record, sorted it out by not sorting it out. I may have helped in the sense that I told each of them, separately, that the other had already agreed. Lin Yuexi, the gentlest, folded first. Talk to senior sister, I'll follow her. Bai Xiun agreed before I'd finished the sentence, calm as still water. She'd thought it through on the way. As a partner I was worth 100 of anyone, and how many I chose was my business, and quieter that she'd have wanted me even if it weren't to keep me alive. There was one wobble where Lin Yuexi thought Xiun was my one and only and teared up, and then it resolved into the 3 of us together. We take care of junior brother, and I want to be clear that I didn't deserve any of it, and I accepted all of it anyway. The system, translating love into numbers with the soul of an accountant, watched the 2 of them settle toward me and started counting up, and I started, at last, to breathe. 2 sisters, 2 hearts turning, 1 year on the clock, and the clock, for the first time in 100, was on my side. Then 2 warships crested the northern sky, full of armored soldiers, and my brand new soft life turned back into the other kind. They were royal barges, the Liang Kingdom and the Liefeng Kingdom, and Liefeng is one of the 5 great empires, the kind of power that flattens a sect if a sect is stupid enough to earn it. The setup was old and grubby. Weak little Liang wanted to marry its famous 3rd princess up to Liefeng's crown prince, buy an alliance, and go eat a spirit stone-rich neighbor, and Liefeng's crown prince had come in person to collect his bride, Shu Tianrui, golden core middle, snow-white robe, a folding fan, maids kneading his shoulders as he rode, a princeling assembled from a checklist. He'd come to claim the 3rd princess of Liang. Small problem. The 3rd princess of Liang was Lin Yuexi, my 2nd sister. Sent to our sect as a girl by a low-favor concubine mother, and, she told me this on the way down, flat and cold, orphaned when that mother drowned in a palace lake 100 years back. A Foundation realm cultivator does not drown. Lin Yuexi has never once believed it was an accident. She owed the Liang Palace exactly nothing, and she'd come down the mountain to say so with her hand in mine. Mei Lihua caught us hand in hand on the way, and I just told her straight, 2nd sister and I are together, and eldest sister too, and braced for the lecture. She called me greedy, agreed it was excellent, said keep the good things in the family, and escorted us to the hall like a proud aunt. I really can't overstate how much easier my life is than it has any right to be. The throne room part went the way these things go when a princeling meets people who aren't afraid of him. He Jian hosted politely. Shu Tianrui took one look at Lin Yuexi and Bai Xiyun and decided both of them were a perfect match for him, then saw the third princess holding hands with a mere disciple and turned an interesting color. Lin Yuexi didn't so much as glance at him. She greeted only her uncle Shu, the Liang prince escorting the barge, sat down between me and Bai Xiyun, and publicly, permanently, cut herself off from the Liang royal family, a disciple of the profound spirit sect now, never returning. Shu Tianrui demanded an explanation and reached for one by insulting me. A mere disciple, he sneered, snapping his fan shut. Dares interrupt a crown prince? Do they teach you nothing on this mountain but how to hold a woman's hand above your station? So I asked him the honest question, the one I actually wanted the answer to. What are you exactly? Golden core middle at your age, an empire's whole treasury poured into you, and this is what came out the other end. How did Li Feng look at an entire generation and land on you? A Li Feng elder started toward me with his aura out, meaning to fold a disciple flat in front of 2 kingdoms, and he got 1 step, maybe 1.5, before Mei Lihua said, without troubling to turn her head, 1 more step and you die, and he discovered he had become a statue. Then she turned the full weight of a soul transformation grandmother onto the crown prince himself. Your dignity, she informed him pleasantly, is not worth one of my grandson's fingers. You came to collect a bride like a parcel, found her holding another man's hand, and now you'd like someone punished for your embarrassment. Here is what happens instead. You apologize to the room for the noise. And if the word war so much as forms in your mouth, your crown prince seat will be gone before your barge clears our mountains. I have the letters half written already. And then, because his elder's little tantrum had cracked the flagstones of our hall, she made the crown prince of Li Feng stand there and count out spirit stones for the repair, coin by coin, in front of everyone, before she would let him leave. He left, humiliated in front of 2 kingdoms, the bride he thought was his fortune walking off hand in hand with a nobody, a bill for the floor in his pocket. And as the barges lifted away, he swore, I could see him swearing it, that he'd wash all of it clean in my blood and take Lin Yuexi anyway. Good, I thought. I'd been needing enemies who deserved it. I filed Shu Tianrui of Li Feng under Later, a folder that, in my life, never once loses a name. That night, my eldest sister called me to her room, and some things you don't narrate. I'll only tell you that the coldest woman on the mountain turned out to have been quietly on fire the whole time, and that the next morning the landlord posted a number that made me sit down. Bai Xiyun. Dependence. 80%. 80. On the first turn of her heart, because she'd loved me longer than I'd known, and the system only ever measured what was already true. Lin Yuexi climbed the same way, night by night, and yes, before you ask, Lin Yuexi spent those nights on the other side of a wall cursing stinky junior brother through the stone exactly 3 times each, because she runs out of words at 3, and because in her opinion, nothing decent should happen more than 3 times. Over 3 months, the 2 of them crept toward 98%, and for the first time since the cave, I stopped feeling the clock at my back. At 98, the system showed me what waited at the top. 2 hearts fully turned would pay out a breakthrough pill, snaps any bottleneck below the void refinement realm, no side effects, the single most valuable object in the region, and I'd have a fistful, plus 5 unlimited lottery draws, plus the shop, unlocked, the whole heaven's worth of goods laid open to anyone with love enough to spend. And I already knew the first thing I'd buy. Not power, not for me. There was an old man on this mountain who'd shattered his own foundation 100 years ago to drag me out of a death I'd earned, and had been dying slowly of it ever since, and I was going to walk into that shop the moment it opened and buy his life back. But first, the whole eastern region decided to come and take everything we had. Both my sisters hit 100% on the same quiet afternoon, and the system paid out like a struck vault. My physique finished repairing in a single roaring instant, the chaos divine demon body, whole for the first time since I got it, and even the 2 of me who'd never met, the crippled one and the prodigy, would agree the new one was worse to fight. My cultivation snapped all the way back, and then some. Nascent soul middle again, my Dantian a churning chaos sea that ate spiritual energy like a black hole eats light. 100 years of climbing handed back to me in 5 breaths, plus interest. The chaos yin-yang scripture unfolded in my head in a trance so deep I forgot to breathe. Not a technique so much as a multiplier bolted onto every other technique, and, the system noted with the enthusiasm of a man mentioning a coupon, it half works on my Tao companions too. And the ledger line underneath, the one that actually mattered, luck value, 19,926,000. 30 breakthrough pills, 5 unlimited lottery draws, shop, open. The sisters wouldn't let me thank them. Family doesn't say thank you, they said, and forbade the words, and I swallowed them, and went to spend nearly 3 million luck on an old man's life. Duan Xingchen, my 3rd grand uncle. Once the most gifted cultivator of his generation, the man who'd hit nascent soul middle before crippling himself 100 years ago to haul me out of that ambush and had been dying by inches ever since. Until the day I walked into his hut, he was a husk with hair like an abandoned bird's nest. I put 2 pills in his hand. He tried to give them back. Nothing can save this old bag of bones, he said. Keep them. It's enough that you recovered. I didn't argue with him. I've never won an argument with Duan Xingqian in my life. I just fed him the big patching heaven pill and watched 100 years of ruin unknit, the husk filling back into a man, and then, before he could get a word out, a breakthrough pill, and my 3rd grand uncle who'd stalled at nascent soul middle before he broke himself for me, shot straight up past his own old ceiling to soul transformation late. He wept. I wept. I'd carried that debt for a century, like a stone sewn into my chest, and it came out all at once, and I don't have a joke for this part because there isn't one. Some debts you pay before you make yourself funny about them again. When I told the ancestors I was fully recovered, let the nascent soul middle aura off its leash for one breath, manhwa made a sound I will treasure until I die, and I mentioned, offhand, that I happen to have around 20 more god pills lying around. That reset the whole room's understanding of the situation. Duan Xingqian, freshly soul transformation late, flew me straight up to Feng Tianyun, who was about to attempt a 1-month suicide breakthrough of his own to prepare for the coming war, and I put a breakthrough pill in the kind farmer's hand instead, and he broke to soul transformation late in an afternoon, no dying required. Mei Lihua took one and aimed for the middle stage. In the span of a few hours, a sect that everyone in the region had written off as a dying invalid quietly grew a 3rd and a 4th fang, and I stood in the middle of it, laundering miracles through a cover story about an old immortal's ruined cache that I'd looted in my early years, because the truth, a shop in my soul that runs on my wife's love, is not a sentence you can say out loud. I want to flag one thing because it's going to matter later, and I'd feel dishonest hiding it. Every one of these breakthroughs came out of luck points, and luck points come out of love, and I was already very quietly aware that the entire foundation of my new life was a currency printed by the hearts of women who trusted me. I didn't examine that too closely at the time. I had a war coming. And here's how the war got started, and it's almost funny, in the way a knife is almost a spoon. A rumor caught fire across the whole eastern region that the profound spirit sect had discovered the lost legacy of the fairy of utmost bliss in our Helen mountain mine, her immortal cave, her treasures, her techniques. Someone had even planted a genuine top-grade spirit treasure in the mine to sell it, a real crimson cloud cloak, so the story had a body. And then the rumor grew its second head, the one aimed straight at us, that the reason sect master Bai Yongxi had suddenly gone looking for a Tao companion was that she'd found the fairy's dual cultivation technique, a method cultivable all the way to the Mahayana realm. Do you see the shape of it? Somebody out there knew the true thing, that Bai Yongxi and dual cultivation were tangled together, and had spun it into a lie so close to the truth we couldn't deny it without confirming it. The best frame-ups are made of real cloth. Master, blushing furiously every time someone said dual cultivation out loud, ordered the mine thrown open to prove we were hoarding nothing, recalled every outside elder, and locked the back mountain. It didn't matter. Truth was never the point. The 8 great sects didn't care whether we had the fairy's technique. They cared that we might, and that our old ancestor was conveniently missing, and that a sect holding a road to the Mahayana realm was a sect worth robbing while it was down. The whole region descended on the Helen mine. All 8 great sects, 20+ soul transformation elders, come to search a mountain for a treasure that had never been on it. Li Heng met them at the mine mouth, my cold, cautious granduncle, the man who'd kept a ledger against me for 100 years and threw the whole thing open. Dig, he told them. Search every vein. Take a year, if a year's what it costs you to feel foolish. They searched for a month and found exactly nothing because there was nothing, and then they did the thing greedy men always do when the evidence disappoints them. They decided the evidence was lying. 2 friends bought us the month. The Heavenly Sword Sect and the Jade Snow Palace, the only 2 great sects that didn't quite believe the story, stood up in the crowd and said the reasonable words, search first and judge after, and that held the greedy ones at arm's length while the mine turned up dirt. But a month of dirt doesn't cure greed, it just makes it hungry and embarrassed at the same time, which is the worst way for a strong man to feel, and 5 of the great sects came to our gate to do something about it. They came dressed in their very best reason. Qinlong of the Nether sect did the talking, a lean, dry elder with a voice like a man reading you a contract you've already signed. Lend us the fairy of utmost bliss's technique, he said. That's the whole of it. You found her legacy. A top-grade cloak doesn't fall out of an empty sky. Copy the dual cultivation manual for us. You keep your original, you lose nothing, and we all go home friends. My master stood at the gate in white and did not trouble herself to be polite. A lost cloak proves I'm a thief, Bai Yongxi said. The way a lost boot proves you walked here on your hands. I could bury a treasure on your mountain tonight, Qinlong, and stand in your hall by noon calling it some other immortal's cave. Shall I show you how the trick's done? Zhang Zifeng of the Luoxia sect tried the reasonable man angle, the one robbers love best. It's ownerless knowledge, sect master, left lying about by a dead immortal. We only ask for a copy. Where's the harm in sharing what the heavens abandoned? Which is the exact voice every thief in history has used right before explaining that your house is, if you think about it properly, technically, the universe's. Hua Jin answered that one. My hot-blooded grand uncle, freshly down from a month at the mine and in no mood, stepped up beside Master and said one word loud enough to come back off the far peaks. No. And then, because he is constitutionally incapable of stopping at one word, you want the technique? Declare your war and come dig it out of our teeth. We'll count who's still standing to copy anything. That should have ended it. It didn't, because they had one card left, and they laid it down slow so we'd all watch. 10 days. Hand the technique over in 10 days, or the 5 of them come back together and take the sect apart one stone at a time. Then they left, and they left backward, watching our faces the whole way, because the single thing that bought us those 10 days at all was a ghost. Our old ancestor, Sky Shatterer Dragon, soul transformation late, had been missing 100 years and nobody could prove he was gone. And one working soul transformation late elder defending his own mountain is the sort of problem that takes 4 or 5 of you to solve and costs at least one of you your life doing it. So they'd go home and gather their own old ancestors and come back in 10 days sure of the numbers. 10 days. That was the pressure. Here's what I did while it built, and it's the single most reckless financial decision I have ever made, and I would make it again with a smile. The shop had a lottery, 5 draws, 4 of them came up. Thank you for your patronage, which is system for nothing, and the 5th came up a one-time, interest-free, 5,000-year megaloan, up to 10 billion luck points. Default on it, and the system reaches into my skull, erases the technique I bought with it, and repossesses everything I've gained. 10 billion. The shop's top-shelf held techniques the whole eastern region couldn't have imagined, the human Tao, the immortal Tao, the Holy Spirit Tao, and above them all the chaos great Tao, and at the very peak of that a single technique called the Tao Jing, priced at exactly 10 billion, described in 6 words that made the hair on my arms stand up. A thought collapses the universe. A cultivation ceiling with no ceiling. And the system, which had never once volunteered an opinion about my heart, volunteered a very firm opinion about this. Take it. So I did. I took the whole loan and I spent it in one breath, and I walked out of that shop owing the heavens 10 billion luck points against a technique that made me, in principle, able to grow forever. And then I did the math, because the math is the story now. I owe roughly 2 million luck a year in payments. 2 wives give me maybe 700,000 a year between them. Which means the arithmetic of my entire existence had just become brutally simple. Every new daughter of destiny I win is worth 20 million luck the day her heart turns, plus a river of it after. And if I ever stop winning them, the universe repossesses my mind and hands me back my death. I bought a god on layaway. Miss a payment and the repo man is inside my head. I'd love to tell you this kept me up at night. Mostly it just made me extremely motivated. I also spent a couple million on a giant spirit sword, a low-grade sacred artifact that lets any wielder below void refinement swing 10 times their own strength twice with a 10-day cooldown, because a war was coming and the sect needed a fang it could hold in its own hand. Then I went to go win a war with it. The days before the deadline were an education in what people are. Every little force that had ever sheltered under our name raced to disown us. Heavenly Fire Sect, Zxiao Pavilion, the Shu and Zhou and Bai families, old allies, all of them, publicly severed ties and started slandering us to curry favor with the Nether Sect, who'd bribed them with a promised copy of the treasure we didn't have. 100 years we'd protected these people. They lined up to spit on us for a coupon. Only one force in the whole region stayed silent and loyal, and I'll get to them, because loyalty in that flood deserves its own breath. Meanwhile, behind the back mountain, under Feng Tianyun's protection, the elders took turns swallowing my breakthrough pills like a production line, and one by one, the sect grew fangs it had never owned. Li Heng went first among the doubters, the cautious one, the black-robed second seat, the man who'd kept a ledger against me for a century and buried one of his own disciples in the hunt for my cure. He broke to soul transformation late and felt his own aura settle into a weight he had only ever felt once in his long life, standing in the shadow of the old ancestor himself. And he turned and looked at me for a long moment. The cripple he'd argued against, the bad investment, the boy the whole sect had bled itself white to keep breathing, and he didn't say anything grand. He just lowered his head, the smallest fraction, the way a proud man says sorry when the words won't come out whole. I lowered mine back. 100 years of being the worst line in his ledger settled between us in one nod. Hua Jin broke to the middle stage. He Jane got 1 foot across the threshold. 4 more elders queued behind them, waiting their turn at a miracle they still weren't allowed to explain out loud. The sect the whole region had traveled here to bury was, quietly, inside a sealed-back mountain, becoming the single strongest thing standing on it, and it was doing the entire thing in silence, behind a stolen calm, and I have rarely in 300 years enjoyed anything half so much. The morning of the deadline, 10,000 disciples stood at our gate and roared a single word, kill, loud enough to roll off the peaks 100 miles out and come back. Facing them, 5 great sects and a Lifeng army in ranked armor, and half the eastern region behind that come to watch a dying sect finally die. Then the enemy old ancestors came down out of the sky, and the temperature of the whole mountain dropped. 5 of them. Every one's soul transformation late. More raw ruin gathered in one place than the eastern region had seen since the war that broke it. Li Ming of the Nether sect at the front, a broad, bald tyrant who had once leveled an entire sect, gate to grave, for the crime of calling him domineering, and who wore the memory of it like a good coat. Behind him, Wei Shan of the Flowing Cloud sect, riding a nascent soul blood dragon he chained to a saddle because subtlety is for the weak. Fang Yan of the Luoxia sect, fat and beaming, a wine gourd on his hip, a man they called the Smiling Yama because he liked to be pleasant to people right up until the moment he wasn't. Gao Wenbin of the Kanglin sect, a lean scholar with ink-stained fingers who looked like he'd wandered in from a library and would leave the same way, unhurried, once the shelving was done. And Huo Ling of the Ning Luo sect, saying nothing, which is its own kind of threat. Li Ming looked down at our gate the way you'd look at a stubborn lock. 100 years I've waited for this sect to drop low enough to reach, he said, pleasant, carrying. Hand over the fairy's manual, hand over the girl who found it, and I'll let the juniors live to sweep the courtyard. Refuse me, and by sundown there's no courtyard and no juniors and no sect. You've had your 10 days, old ghosts. What's the answer? Up on the gate, Feng Tianyun, one gray-robed old man with a face like a kind farmer, sat and said nothing at all and let the tyrant enjoy the sound of his own voice. Because here's the thing the 5 of them were quietly, carefully not saying to each other, the reason they'd sat on their hands 10 whole days when the numbers so obviously favored a rush. They still couldn't prove where our old ancestor had gone. Sky Shatterer Dragon, missing 100 years, maybe dead in some far corner, maybe about to walk out of seclusion into the middle of their mourning. 5 soul transformation late elders is a great deal of power right up until one more of them appears on the wrong side, and no one wants to be the corpse that funds the discovery. So they postured, and they threatened, and every one of them kept one eye on the back mountain, waiting to see who'd flinch first. They had the numbers exactly wrong, and they were about to find out by how much. And here is the part I will love until the day I really do die. Our disciples came home to fight. The whole region had assumed we'd evacuate, scatter the juniors, hide the seed corn, run. That's what a sane sect does when 5 old ancestors set up at its gate. Instead, our people came home. One after another, thousands of them, dropping out of the sky and walking in through that gate with their heads up, each one roaring the same 3 words as they crossed the threshold. Profound spirit sect, returning. Golden cores and nascent souls and gray-templed elders and disciples barely past foundation, all of them coming back to stand and, if it came to that, die on the mountain that had raised them. Nether's Han Yueming had laid an ambush on the roads to pick off the ones fleeing and caught almost nobody because almost nobody was fleeing. The watching crowd, half the eastern region, come for a funeral, went quiet, and then went uneasy because a sect that runs toward its own execution is not behaving like a sect that is about to lose. And into that flood came the single force that had stayed loyal while the whole region was busy selling us for a coupon. The Sword Control sect, blunt ox-eyed Guo Chengkun at its head, arriving in the open to stand with us, repaying a debt 100 years old from the season we dragged them out of an annihilation nobody else would lift. A finger to stop. On his way through the gate, he stopped in front of the traitor sects, the little forces lined up to cheer our killers, and he looked them over slowly and said it loud enough for the whole field to hear. You crawled here to lick the boots of the men who came to murder the sect that sheltered you for a century. So tell me, how are you any different from pigs and dogs? Not one of them had an answer. The neutral crowd did, though. You could feel it move. I marked Guo Chengkun privately for a reward. I keep that folder too, the one for the people who show up on the day it costs something. Feng Tianyun didn't let our disciples brawl. Kill the head, he said, and the body runs. He walked out to the front of the gate alone, one gray-robed old man with a farmer's kind face, and he named his opponent, Li Ming, old ancestor of the Nether sect. 100 years of grudges between us, and the sect I'd always half suspected of being the hand behind my ambush, the tyrant who once leveled a whole sect for the crime of calling him domineering. The whole region held its breath because everyone there knew the arithmetic. Feng Tianyun was soul transformation middle. Li Ming was soul transformation late, a full stage. Our kind old grand teacher had just walked out to commit a very dignified suicide. Li Ming laughed at him and dropped a golden palm the size of a mountain out of the sky. Feng Tianyun looked up at the thing coming down to erase him, and he said, mild as a man remarking on the weather, I have a sword that can kill a soul transformation. Then he stopped hiding. The soul transformation late aura came off him like a struck bell, the stage he'd broken to on one of my pills, the secret we'd kept for exactly this second, and he drew the giant spirit sword, my giant spirit sword, 10 times a man's strength in one stroke, and he cut the tyrant of the nether sect clean in half. One stroke. Li Ming's nascent soul tore loose from the ruin of his body trying to blood escape, and the other 4 enemy old ancestors barely caught it, barely sealed it into a jade disc. His cultivation wrecked for centuries, the tyrant reduced to a flickering soul in a stranger's pocket. And the entire eastern region, which had traveled to our mountain to watch a dying sect finally die, watched instead the precise instant the world turned over. 3 soul transformation late ancestors on our side, where there'd been none, a holy sword, and 10,000 disciples at the gate who had come home to die and now didn't have to. The 4 surviving old ancestors went from robbers to prey in the space of a single breath, and you could see each of them do the same fast, cold math and arrive at the same word, run. They folded instantly, of course, blamed the nether sect, pretended they'd been deceived, sued for peace. Feng Tianyun said, not enough, and turned to the traitors, the little forces who disowned us for a coupon. The Nether Elder disowned them right back. When did I ever instruct you? The Heavenly Fire Master and the Shu and Zhou and Bai heads groveled in the dirt. Feng Tianyun's sentence was simple. End your own lives, withdraw your sects 30,000 miles, leave everything. They chose to run instead, and Huajin caught them in the air, and they did not land as anything that could be buried. I watched the traitors fall like kites with their strings cut, and I felt nothing I'm going to apologize for. 100 years we'd carried these people. Grievance for grievance, kindness for kindness. That's the whole of the law I keep. And the profound spirit sect, in a single morning, stopped being the region's victim and started being the thing the region was afraid of. It was, I thought, a good morning. And then a carriage pulled by 4 dragons came down out of the sky to make it a much stranger one. 4 white dragons, each at the nascent divinity realm, pulling a carriage carved from materials that made my newly solvent, deeply in debt heart weep with recognition. The whole rig was worth more than every sect on that battlefield stacked together. Out of it stepped a little girl, 14 years old, she refinement, barely, and a panel that made my landlord fall silent with respect, which it had never once done. Shen Shuiyun, daughter of destiny, age 14, physique, myriad realm, saint spirit body, beloved of all living things, blessed by heaven's own luck, immune to every evil in the world. And I want to be extremely clear about this next part, because the shape of my life invites a certain assumption, and the assumption is wrong. I took one look at that number, age 14, and closed the door in my own head so fast it slammed. A child, a little sister, an ally, a lucky star, full stop, forever. The system can flag whatever it likes. Some doors you don't just leave shut, you brick over. She beamed up at me, called me big brother, and offered to have her frighteningly powerful guardians help me fight my war, and that was the entire nature of us, then and always. Her guardians were the interesting part. A poker-faced old man who'd been driving the carriage, name of Feng Chang, who felt like a still pond over a very deep well, and a white-haired granny, Wu Meijin, and 4 nascent soul maids as an afterthought. The 5 great sects, who'd been slinking off after the Li Ming disaster, took one look at this arrival and slunk faster, praying the newcomers were our enemies. They weren't. They'd come to beg. Inside the hall, the girl's guardian did the talking, and the girl herself did the thing that actually moved me. The Shen family of the Shenki continent, and Shenki, understand, is the greatest of the 7 continents of this whole vast realm, a place that makes our entire eastern region look like a puddle a horse stepped in on its way somewhere that mattered. And this family, with its dragon carriage and its void refinement servants, had crossed the length of the realm to kneel in a backwater sex hall, because their eldest young miss, Shen Shuiyun's big sister, 23 years old, had been born with a monstrous sacred physique that carried a monstrous bill. Dead before 20 without one specific medicine, the vermilion bird sacred spirit fruit. She was already 23. She was already, by every reckoning anyone knew, out of time. A dying Taoist read the heavens for us, the white-haired granny, Wu Meijin said, and burned the last of his own life doing it. He pointed east, to a spirit sect of 1,000 mountains, to the divine sun of a coming calamity, which meant us, and, reading the space between the words, me. And then little Shen Shuiyun, 14 years old and red-eyed and utterly without guile, stepped forward past her terrifying guardians and simply asked, the way only a child can ask, please, my big sister is going to die, and everyone says the answer is somewhere here. Will you help us look for it? Feng Tianyun was wary, and right to be. You don't let strangers into your core the same week someone framed you. So I vouched. Let them stay, I told him. And privately, I gave him the real reason, which had nothing to do with a child's smile. The Shen family came from Shenqi, and Shenqi was exactly where our old ancestor, Sky Shatterer Dragon, had vanished hunting my cure 100 years ago. A family with that kind of reach might be able to find him. I don't do many things for one reason. It's a flaw. It's kept me alive. And speaking of the old ancestor, that's when I finally heard from him. I'd pushed for a breakthrough of my own, no pill this time, because a breakthrough pill would have capped me under the true ceiling of the Dao Jing, and I had not mortgaged my soul to the heavens for a ceiling. So I sat down on inviting Moon Peak and broke to nascent soul late on my own power, and the breakthrough was 10 times more violent than the one that had crippled me a century back. Spiritual energy came down out of the sky and flooded 1,000 miles in every direction, a tide thick enough to drown a mountain, and the 3 soul transformation late ancestors dropped what they were doing and raced to the peak to stack barrier on barrier over it, because a nascent soul is not supposed to move that much heaven, and the last thing we needed was the whole region feeling it. And then, behind me, a thing that had no business existing condensed out of the storm, a golden body phantom, a natal manifestation, the kind of towering Tao image a cultivator doesn't earn until soul transformation, if he earns it at all, standing there, gold and vast, behind a mere nascent soul. Bai Xian had come to keep watch and forgot how to speak. The ancestors just stared. 3 of the most powerful men in the eastern region gone slack-jawed as farmhands. That's bigger than my own soul transformation breakthrough was, Feng Tianyun said, to no one, sounding almost frightened. He's 300 years old. Really more like 200 if you subtract the century I'd spent as a crippled countdown. And I was, quietly, up on that peak, rewriting the list of things a man that age is allowed to do. And in the middle of that, Feng Tianyun's talisman to the missing old ancestor finally, after 100 years of silence, got an answer. 1 sentence. Do not come looking for me until you reach the Hedao realm. Hedao, 2 full realms above the ceiling of our entire region, a height no one here had touched since the demon extermination war 100,000 years ago. To everyone in that room it read as never, as a old man's kind way of saying don't throw your lives after mine. The Shen guardian, Feng Chang, quietly worked out where he was. Heavenly Immortal Island, the pre-ascension ground of an immortal named Tianwu, a place 400,000 years old whose inner formation suppresses a trespasser's realm lower and lower until the safe parts of it kill him. Our old ancestor had wandered too deep. His realm was crushed down so far that a single terse sentence was all the talisman power he could spare. He'd gone to Shenqi to find my cure. That's why he was trapped. Add it to the ledger in my chest, right under Duan Xingchen. Everyone humored me when I said it, the way you humor a boy. I will reach Hedao, and I will bring him home. Fine, let them humor me. I've made a career out of promises other people were sure I'd never keep. Little Shen Shuiyun came to say goodbye before her family raced home, asked me to call her little spirit, wept over her dying sister, begged me to buy the vermilion fruit if I ever found one, and tried to press a top-grade spirit treasure dagger on me as thanks. I refused it. You don't take a frightened child's treasure when you can't yet repay her. It cost me something to refuse because, and here's the knife of it, I had the vermilion fruit sitting in my shop that very moment. 3 million luck, and I could not afford to touch it, not with the lone repo man living in my skull. She went home with her sister still dying and my promise in her pocket, and I filed that under the folder that never loses a name, except this one was a debt I owed, not one owed to me. Then Feng Tianyun sat me down and told me we had to go break off my engagement, because, surprise, I'd been engaged for 100 years. When I was the sex golden boy, they'd quietly betrothed me to the saintess of the Heavenly Sword Sect, an alliance to shield the prodigy. Then I got crippled 2 days later, and both sides discreetly shelved it, waiting to see if I'd live. Now, with 2 sisters bonded and my whole strange future to protect, the thing had to be formally annulled. So Feng Tianyun and Mei Lihua and my 3 loyal followers and I sailed 12 days to the Heavenly Sword Sect to gently release a woman from her obligation to a dying man. She declined. Her name was Lan Xuanji, saintess of the Heavenly Sword Sect, groomed to be their next sect master, a red-robed woman with a sword at her hip and a wine gourd on her belt, and absolutely no interest in my grand teacher's tactful little speech about setting her free. When Feng Tianyun explained we'd come to annul the betrothal, assuming, reasonably, that she'd be thrilled to dodge a corpse, she walked in, put her sword flat on the table, and informed the entire hall that a virtuous woman does not serve 2 husbands, that she'd been engaged to me for 100 years, and that if I was really beyond saving, she would simply stay my widow. Her own elders were aghast. They could not move her. I had come to dump her and discovered I was not permitted to. And then the panel over her head resolved, and I understood the joke the universe was playing because it was a good one. Lan Xuanji, daughter of destiny, age 280, golden core late, physique, innate immaculate sword body, one of the greatest sword natures ever born, a heart that masters any blade the instant she touches it, full conquest, 20 million luck. The fiancé I'd traveled 12 days to discard was, to the decimal, the exact thing my debt clock needed most in all the world. I have never pivoted so hard on my own heel. 10 minutes earlier, I'd been rehearsing how to let a stranger down gently. Now I was trying to work out how to keep an engagement I'd come specifically to break without confessing why I suddenly, desperately wanted it. She got me alone in a side hall and set her sword on the table between us, point toward me, which is a sword saintess's version of pouring the tea. Explain yourself, she said. You crossed 12 days of open sea to end a 100-year betrothal to a woman you have never once met. Most men would have sent a letter. Why come in person to insult me? I'm dying, I said, giving her the noble version. Foundation shattered, lifespan spent, Van. I won't chain a woman like you to a corpse. That's the whole of it. You're free, and you ought to be glad of it. She looked at me for a long, level moment, and then she waved the entire tragedy away like smoke off a candle. I know all of that. The crippled prodigy of the profound spirit sect. Half the continent knows the story. I knew it before your grand teacher opened his mouth. The sword did not move. And I don't care. I was betrothed to the finest talent the Eastern region ever raised, and a broken foundation doesn't change what you were or what you would have been. No one I have ever met measures up to you, alive or dying. So here is my answer. Since you came all this way for one, if you live, I am your wife. If you die, I am your widow, and I will cut down anyone who says a woman has no right to mourn a husband she never got to marry. That is the end of it. Now sit down. I sat down. I'd come to release a stranger from her obligation and been informed, at sword point, that I was not permitted to, and somewhere in my skull the landlord was tallying up 20 million luck and openly weeping with joy, and I kept my face perfectly still and did not let a single point of it show. I stood there, a cripple, being fought over by a sword saintess who'd known me for exactly one afternoon, and thought, I have got to stop expecting this to go badly. Her sex number 2 prodigy took it worst of anyone. Song Lei, 400 years old, golden core, late, a suitor who'd spent a decade quietly casting himself as the saintess's future husband, blocked my path in the courtyard to inform me, and everyone in earshot, that a crippled Eastern nobody wasn't fit to stand in her shadow. My follower Wei Guang answered before I could open my mouth, cold, black-clad, a giant sword across his back, nascent soul, now thanks to one of my pills. He stepped in front of me and looked Song Lei up and down like a man pricing a chicken. I'm 401, he said. You're 400, same generation, so no one gets to cry foul afterward. I'll use one hand and no artifact. You bring your very best. Sword. And then we'll all find out who isn't worthy of what. Song Lei brought his best sword, a medium-grade spiritual artifact, a 30% edge, and Wei Guang snapped it in half with his bare fingers and knocked the man flat, and flat again, and flat a third time, with the patient thoroughness of a servant beating dust out of a rug, until Song Lei landed in a heap at my feet, still shrieking insults up at me from the dirt. Wei Guang, I said. Swell his face. I'd like 3 teeth gone. Wei Guang is a thorough man. He made it 6. And the whole heavenly sword sect stood in that courtyard, recalculating, in real time, what it meant that a crippled nobody could still command nascent soul followers this loyal and this mean, that the 7 who'd abandoned me the day I fell had been fools, and the 3 who'd stayed were each worth more than a sect's entire roster of the fair weather kind. Then Lan Xuanji claimed me in public. Luo Zhou is my fiancé. Object in the arena or hold your tongue. And when Song Lei wailed where he was inferior, she looked at him and said, in my eyes, in every possible way, which is the single most devastating sentence I've ever heard one cultivator hand another. Her master, sect master Longbo Feng, arrived furious to punish me for the beating and got nowhere because his little swan had made up her mind, and Feng Tianyun, the kind farmer with a fox living behind his eyes, had already quietly let it be known that the profound spirit sect's recent surge came from a certain kind of breakthrough pill, and that the betrothal gift, should the alliance hold, might just be one of those for their long-stalled old ancestor. Their elders flipped inside a day. Suddenly, it was Longbo Feng being scolded by his own grand elders for mistreating an honored guest. Song Lei was made to apologize and exiled to a cliff to think about it until he reached nascent soul, and the engagement I'd come to end was, against all my intentions, extremely on. While all this was happening, far away, the man who'd built the frame-up finally got a face. A legless thing in a wheelchair, a soul transformation cultivator with a voice like a draft under a door, who called himself a national teacher, and beside him, a familiar sulking princeling, Shu Tianrui of Lifeng. The plan the two of them laid out to each other was simple and patient. Keep the fairy inheritance rumor spreading across the whole continent. Let greed do the work. Let other people tear the profound spirit sect apart. And then, said the national teacher, all those beauties will be yours. My enemies had a face now, and a motive, and the motive was my women and my sect's bones. Good. Faces are easier to hit than rumors. The Heavenly Sword Elders had one more card, and it turned out to be the biggest hook of all. The reason they'd hesitated to marry Xuanji off, it emerged, wasn't the dying cripple problem. It was that in 2 years the Ascension Dao Academy was reopening its doors. The Ascension Dao Academy, the single greatest power of the entire Qingyun continent, founded by an ancestor named Tian Guang, its dean a Hadao realm immortal, its vaults full of heaven-tier techniques, seated at the sacred heart of the continent. It was reopening recruitment because, the elders lowered their voices to say it, a great era of cultivation was coming. They wanted Xuanji to test in, which meant placing in the top 20 of the whole continent, no small thing for a daughter of the eastern region, which is the weakest of the 4 domains. Its foundation shattered 100,000 years ago in the same war that made the old ancestors' prison. Cultivate there 3 years, they said. If she still wanted the cripple after, they wouldn't object. She agreed, on the condition that she got to discuss it with me first, which she did, and I told her I'd wait 5 years because I had a landlord in my head that I fully intended to make her rich enough to test in, and I filed the academy away under a folder I didn't have a name for yet, the one that would turn out to hold the rest of my life. Before we left, she snuck me to the Holy Lotus Sword Washing Pool, a treasure her sect opens once a decade, a green lotus that extends life, and spent the night trying to heal a man who was already fine, a real gift given over her master's fury, and I let her believe it was working, and something warm started up between us that had nothing to do with luck points. And then Feng Tianyun cut the visit short and ran us home at full speed, because the frame-up had caught fire again, now claiming his Yu Baihu breakthrough and the Holy Sword both came from the fairy's treasure, same fingerprints, the wheelchair man's patient hand. So I made my counterplan, and it was an ugly, beautiful thing. If the whole region was going to believe fabricated treasures existed, then I would fabricate some on our enemies. Plant incomplete sacred artifacts on the sects that hated us most, muddy the water until we weren't the only prize in the pond, and underneath that, bait my 100-year-old assassins into a second attempt so I could finally drag them into the light. I offered the ancestors more than 10 sacred artifacts from my old immortal's cache to seed the lie, worthless to me, precious to the world, and watched Feng Tianyun's jaw come loose at more than 10. The trap was set, and the whole continent, gorged on greed and rumor, walked toward it exactly as fast as I'd hoped. The next thing through our gate wasn't the eastern region, though. It was worse. It was the north. Because I need you to understand the size of the puddle I was swimming in. The eastern region, my whole world, the 8 great sects, the empires, all of it, is the runt of the 4 domains. Its foundation shattered 100,000 years ago and never rebuilt. Up in the northern realm they grow soul transformation elders like weeds, and their ancestors touch void refinement. And 2 of their top 4 sects had heard there was a fairy's inheritance sitting unguarded in a backwater and came down to collect it. First came the Qingtian sect, one of the northern realm's top 4, a place where soul transformation elders stand gate guard and the ancestors touch void refinement. Their young sect master, Shi Zhongyu, didn't trouble himself to land at the gate like a guest. He drove his flame-steed carriage straight at the sky over our mountain, meaning to set down in the very heart of the sect, because asking permission of an eastern backwater was beneath a man of his breeding. 5 soul transformation. Late elders flew escort, and as they came, they rolled their pressure out across the whole mountain. Not an attack, a measurement. A hand laid flat on the sect's chest to feel how fast the heart was going. The sect answered the only way that language is ever answered. Feng Tianyun and Li Heng and Duan Xingchen rose together and pushed back. 3 soul transformation late auras against 5, and the flamesteed carriage stopped in the air as if it had hit a wall, because it had. And the whole watching eastern region, which had spent a month certain we were about to be stripped to the bone, felt 3 late-stage ancestors on our side, where a season ago there'd been none, and had to sit down and do its arithmetic over. Shi Zhongyu picked me out of the crowd anyway. You're dead, the usual overture, and I filed him under the folder and thought, not for the first time, about how badly I wanted to reach soul transformation myself and stop borrowing my granduncle's fists. Then, on demon beast mounts, a second northern top 4 sect arrived, the Tianyu Divine Sect, Qingtian's old rivals, escorting one of the celebrated Northern Domain's 6 heroes, Sen Shi, nascent soul middle at barely 400, a monster our whole region hadn't grown in 10,000 years. Now there were 2 continent-class powers standing on our mountain. sneering at the barren little Eastern sect and, out of long habit, at each other, and between them, they'd cooked up a robbery polite enough that the strong wouldn't have to feel like bandits committing it. Zhu Jinde of the Tianyu sect laid it out, and he laid it out like a man, extending us a great courtesy. "We are civilized people," he said, spreading his hands. "We won't simply take what we came for. Let the young ones settle it. A tournament, your prodigies against ours, 3 days hence. If your youth hold the arena, we withdraw, every one of us, forever, and never trouble your mountain again." A pause, a gracious little smile. "And if they don't, the winners take 3 months in your steely forest, and you hand over the fairy of utmost bliss's dual cultivation technique. Fair is fair, surely. An open scheme, they call it." The velvet glove pulled snug over the same greedy fist, and aimed with real care at the one joint where we were weakest. Our young geniuses, who could no more stand against monsters the North had bred for 100,000 years than a candle can stand against the tide, aimed precisely at our weakest joint. Because whatever our ancestors could do, our young geniuses could not stand against monsters the North had spent 100,000 years breeding. I voice transmitted Feng Tianyun 2 words. "Agree to it." "I will never let them into the stele forest," I told him, "and we will repay this humiliation twice over." He agreed. 10,000 disciples roared, "Fight!" And I went to go cheat at a children's tournament. First, I armed my peers, a breakthrough pill to my eldest sister Bai Xiyun, another to He-Jin's disciple Huo Jinggang, a fistful more hidden from the elders for later. Then I put on a mask. A bronze ghost mask that hides your face and your realm even from divine sense, because I still wasn't ready to reveal that the crippled Luo Zhou had recovered. I was still baiting the assassins who'd broken me, still keeping my strongest card face down, so I would fight as a nameless masked man. And because my chaos yin-yang scripture let me recover between bouts like a man who doesn't get tired, I could take 3 matches a day and never flag. Day 1, the format was 3-a-side relay, and my senior brother Huo Jinggang drew first blood for us in a hard, honest slugfest against a Tianyu prodigy named Le Qinglong. No tricks, no treasures, just 2 nascent souls hammering at each other until one of them stayed down, and it wasn't ours. The whole sect roared. It was the first time in 100 years anyone had watched a profound spirit disciple stand on a stage and win, and grown men who'd spent that century apologizing for us wept openly into their sleeves. Then Sen Shi walked out and stopped the roaring. One of the northern domains celebrated 6 heroes, nascent soul middle, at barely 400, the kind of monster the great realms grow the way the rest of us grow radishes. He looked at Huo Jinggang, the way you look at a chair somebody left in the doorway, and he beat him in 3 lazy moves, not even a name technique, just raw continent-class power our best young fighter had no answer for. And Huo Jinggang, mouth bleeding, would not yield, coughed once, set his feet, stood there swaying and refusing to fall, because falling lost the relay, and Chen Shi drew his hand back to take the choice away from him for good. So I stepped in and caught my senior brother before the 4th blow could land and carried him to the edge of the stage and put a pill in his hand and told him he'd done the sect proud, which he had. Then I stood up in the bronze mask and turned around. "You used 3 moves on my brother," I told the Northern 6 hero. "So I'll use 3 on you. 1 more than that and I've lost. You have my word on it in front of the whole continent." The assembled youth of the great realms jeered the arrogant bumpkin who'd crawled up out of the puddle they all laughed at. Tenshi smiled and peaked his aura until the stage stone cracked under it. A nascent soul middle pressure meant to fold me before we'd traded a single blow. I used one. A sword of lightning-forged purple, a heaven and earth weight no nascent soul has any business lifting, and it went through his turtle shell shield and through the golden bodyguard underneath it and blasted him clean off the stage in the space of a blink. A northern domain 6 hero, one of the monsters the great realms are so proud of, swatted flat by a masked nobody from the region everyone pities. The silence after it was the largest silence I have ever stood inside. Then Chen Shi started screaming from the rubble that I was a fraud, an old cultivator hiding a wrecked realm behind a young man's mask, and the crowd took it up gladly, because it was so much easier to believe in a disguised elder than in an Eastern prodigy. So I walked to the testing stone and bled a single drop onto it, and the light came up and wrote my age in the air for a continent to read. 400 years. Nascent soul late. A figure the system had faked to the decimal to look like exactly the kind of top continent monster they'd all traveled here to be. Not an elder in disguise, just a young man from the puddle who happened to be better than their best. Somehow that was worse for them. Tianyu divine sect conceded on the spot, swore the withdrawal oath, and left the continent forever. And the masked man looked out over the assembled pride of the whole Qingyun world and said it loud, so it would travel. "Any sect that still isn't convinced, send me your geniuses. I'll be right here. Today, I beat you, and as long as you live, you will never be my equal." The continent, understandably, lost its mind. And the long-scorned eastern region, for the first time in 10,000 years, stood a little taller because a masked man from its dirt had made a northern monster eat the floor. After that, they came for me one at a time, the celebrated names of the great realms, and I built them a ladder out of their own pride and walked each of them down it. I set the terms from the stage myself in the bronze mask, so the whole continent could hear a nobody from the puddle make demands. Open challenge, life and death. 6 hours a day, 3 matches a day, no limits and no complaints. Beat me and take any technique or treasure the sect owns, the steely forest included. Lose and get off my continent. Then I stood there and let them line up. The 5 sons of the south, the 6 heroes of the north. Every name a whole sect had built a generation of hope around. Luo Jin came first, a spear cultivator of the southern 5 sons, who'd been told he was a genius since before he could walk. He was one. It took me a single move to demonstrate that genius is a word that only means anything next to other words, and when he wouldn't stay down, a second move to take the head off his spear so he'd have something to hold while he thought about which region had done it. Gao Feng of the Xian Divine Sect lasted 2. He Jianming of the Moon God Palace, a northern 6 hero with a reputation the size of a mountain, made it to 3 before he went off the stage the way a swatted fly goes off a wall. Each one a rung, each one a name that got quieter every time the crowd said it. And then Mei Tianzhan of the Qingtian sect climbed up, and Mei Tianzhan did not climb back down. He was better than the others. I'll grant the dead that much. 4 moves. On the 4th, he read my sword wrong, the way you read a sword wrong exactly once, and a life and death challenge answers that mistake the way it answers every mistake, and he did not get up, the first man to die on that stage. The Qingtian sect came up out of their seats as one animal, a whole delegation of soul transformation elders on their feet with murder pouring off them, ready to burn the tournament and the rules and the mountain to avenge a boy who'd signed his own death warrant in front of a continent of witnesses, and a poker-faced old man in the stands who had spent the entire tournament looking like a man waiting for a kettle, uncrossed his arms. That was all. Feng Chang didn't stand. He just uncrossed his arms and looked at the Qingtian elders, and the Qingtian elders sat back down, because something in the air had quietly informed them that standing was a mistake with consequences they couldn't price. They tried the other way 3 days later, the honest robbery, since the polite one wasn't working. 4 sects at once. Qingtian, Tianshuan, Xian, the Moon God Palace, done pretending a children's tournament was anything but a heist. 14 soul transformation late elders rising over the arena together to simply take the Stele Forest by force and carry the tournament rule off in a coffin. 14. Our ancestors braced at the gate for a siege we were not at all sure we'd survive, and little Shen Shuiyun's silent carriage driver stepped up into the sky by himself. 4 sects, Feng Chang said, in the mild tone of a man remarking that it might rain. 14 of you. That's flattering, honestly. And then he let his aura off its leash for the first time since the dragon carriage had landed, and every cultivator on that mountain who could feel it went the color of paper, because it did not stop where a soul transformation aura stops. It kept climbing. Void refinement, a full realm over the strongest elder on that field, a height the whole eastern region hadn't produced since the war 100,000 years ago. I can hold 6 or 7 of you by myself, he went on, conversational, and the little Mrs. family will see to the rest. You've all heard the name Shen, so how much would you like to test how much of it is true? The Grand Elder of the Tianshuan sect, a continent-class power, a man whose displeasure rearranged kingdoms, flinched at the word Shen. Just a flicker, quickly hidden. But 14 elders had come up into that sky reading each other's faces, and every one of them saw the flinch at the same instant, and that flinch was the entire conversation. The gang-up came apart in the air like smoke off a snuffed wick. The tournament rule held. And I climbed back onto my stage and went on knocking their legends off it one at a time until 5 quiet days went by, and not one prodigy on the whole Qingyun continent would put his foot on the bottom step. Almost none of them. On the 6th day, the last and best of them finally climbed up. Deng Han, leader of the Northern 6 heroes, fresh out of a decade of seclusion at nascent soul late perfect grade, the only one of the continent's top young monsters who dared come test the mask in person instead of sending lambs ahead of him. He was worth the wait, I'll give him that. His myriad stars art actually reached up and pulled the light of the heavens down onto the arena, a technique with real weight behind a real name, and the crowd leaned in certain that here, at last, was a fight. I let him show me all of it. Then I stopped hiding quite so much of what I was, met his falling star with a bare open palm, and put him off the stage in 3 clean moves, alive, because a leader who fights his own battles has earned that much from me, and because a living legend telling the story of the mask carries it a great deal farther than a dead one would. Xinghuan Immortal Gate conceded on his behalf, and after Deng Han went down in 3, no one on the whole continent climbed those steps again. Two people arrived in the middle of all that who mattered more than the latter. The first was Lan Xuanji. She traveled alone, didn't even tell her master, all the way across the continent to stand near me in case I died so she could avenge me or widow herself, and got promptly blocked by a smitten southern genius named Hua Zhe, who took one look at the red-robed sword saintess and decided he was in love. The masked me told him to get lost, which started a rivalry I did not ask for. I had a sister quietly escort Xuanji up the mountain, and my other two women graciously sent me off to see her, harem harmony being, I'd learned, its own kind of miracle, and I did the thing that actually mattered, which was invest in her. A breakthrough pill over her refusal, up to nascent soul. And the falling star swordplay, a heaven-tier top-grade technique, 9 forms, a method that makes the stars fall and severs the moon, a thing that can trade blows with an immortal, and which cost me 2 million luck I absolutely should not have spent. But she has the innate, immaculate sword body. She learns any blade the instant she touches it. Handing her a heaven-tier sword art was like handing fire to something already made of tinder, and watching her face when she understood what I'd given her. The whole continent has almost no heaven-tier techniques. Her own sect holds one partial earth tier, was worth every point of a debt I couldn't afford. The landlord winced. I did it anyway. Some purchases you make with your heart and let the accountant scream. And the second thing I did, once the tournament was won and the loot secured, was pay a debt to a child. I had the vermilion bird sacred spirit fruit in my shop. 3 million luck. Shen Jueyun's dying sister needed it, and I finally had the luck to spare, so I bought it, and I put it in the little girl's hands, and I told her her sister wasn't going to die. She broke. 14 years old, sobbing into my sleeve. My sister won't die. My sister won't die. I miss my sister. I miss my father. And I stood there holding a weeping child and felt the old wound open, the one shaped exactly like a little sister I couldn't save a lifetime ago, and for once I didn't have a joke because some things you don't undercut. Her guardians, the void refinement Feng Kong and old Wu Meijian, bowed to me and vowed a life debt. Command us. I sent the granny and the girl racing home to Shenki with the fruit that same hour because a dying sister doesn't have a spare month to spend on gratitude. And Feng Chang, a void refinement cultivator strong enough to have simply taken everything I owned, stayed behind as the sect's silent guardian, repaying a fruit with his life. Shen Shuiyun pressed the top-grade dagger on me again before she left, and this time I took it because now I'd earned the right. My sister and I will come and see you, she said, and I believed her. That folder that never loses a name had started keeping the good debts too, and hers was written at the very top. Now, with the sect risen, the tournament won, the North sent home, and a child's sister saved, I could finally do the thing I'd been waiting 100 years to do. I could turn my enemy's own frame up around and bury it in their laps. It worked overnight. Fabricated, incomplete sacred artifacts discovered at the Flowing Cloud sect's mine, and more of them in a ruin near the Lifeng Royal Cemetery. And just like that, the whole continent's greed pivoted off the Profound Spirit sect and onto them. The Qingtian sect, still grieving their dead Mei Tianzhan, led the vultures to Flowing Cloud's door. Shu Tianrui realized, too late, that his own trick had been fed back down his own throat, and the wheelchair national teacher couldn't prove a thing, and started to worry, really worry, that the Little Eastern sect had discovered something about Lifeng it shouldn't have, which, it would turn out, was the truest fear he ever had. Then, while the 5 great sects were scattered and isolated, Nether's tyrant reduced to a soul in a jar, Flowing Cloud drowning under the greed I'd pointed at it, we stopped waiting to be attacked and attacked first. 3 raids, one night, each aimed at cutting the head off a sect forever. Feng Chang went to the Ningluo sect, Duan Xingchen and Hua Jin took the Nether sect, and Feng Tianyun and Mei Lihua, with my giant spirit sword between them, went to the Luoxia sect, where a fat, beaming old ancestor named Feng Yan had stood at our gate a month before and threatened to eat us with a wine cup in his hand. He wasn't beaming when Feng Tianyun cornered him. He was on his knees. The smiling Yama, the man who'd been so very pleasant while he decided which of our juniors he'd kill first, had just discovered that the kind-faced old farmer he'd written off as a soul transformation middle pushover carried a full late-stage aura and a sword that ate whole realms, and he did the thing men like that always do at the end. He begged. Called it all a misunderstanding between reasonable men, offered his vaults, his loyalty, a lifelong oath sworn to the heavens. Old friend, he said, surely we can come to an kindness for kindness, Feng Tianyun told him, in the mild voice of a man who has spent 100 years being kind and has just now finished. Grievance for grievance. That's the whole of the law I keep, and you, old friend, brought me grievance. Then the giant spirit sword came down at 10 times a man's strength, and the old ancestor of the Luoxia sect did not rise, and neither did the nascent soul that tried to flee the wreck of him. 3 sects lost every ancestor they owned that night and poured their vaults into ours. The hunters who'd come a month ago to carve up a dying invalid were, by dawn, the thing on the table. Of the 5 great sects that had nailed a 10-day death clock to our gate, 3 were gone, Flowing Cloud was going, and only one was left standing, the Kanglan sect. Hold on to that name. It turned out to be the hand on every string. Li Feng's answer was the last trick they had. Turn the frame one more time. Spread it that the profound spirit sect had stolen the Li Feng ruins treasures, that our sudden strength, the sacred artifacts, the soul transformation surge, was the proof that we were the thieves crying thief. And most people believed it because most people believe whatever's ugliest. But to the sect council, that lie did one thing the national teacher hadn't meant it to. It confirmed past any doubt that Li Feng was the shadow behind every rumor from the very start. So the verdict was simple. Li Feng Kingdom had to die, and Shu Tianrui with it. Feng Tianyun wanted to endure. Stall, absorb, wait the rumor out, because openly marching an army on one of the 5 great empires would, he argued, only feed the story that the profound spirit sect had become a mad dog that had gotten above itself. It was the careful reed. It was the reed that had kept a sect alive for 1,000 years. I argued the opposite in front of the whole council, and I'll set the argument down here because it's the doctrine I've run my life on ever since. Our real weapon, I told them, was never our strength. It's the fear of us. It's the certainty, spread wide, kept fresh, that if you touch this sect, we will come to your home, walk into your hall, and end your line to the last name. Not next year, not after deliberation, that week. In front of everyone, show a region that certainty one time and no one dares start. Show it weakness one time, stall, negotiate, swallow an insult to look reasonable, and every enemy you have files it away and pounces the moment you look tired, so we don't stall. We march on Li Feng in the open, we end the royal family that put the knife in our back, and we do it where the whole continent can watch. And we don't declare the war until our host is already standing in their capital, so they never get the chance to mount a desperate defense or call in an old favor. Momentum over strength, terror as a fence around everyone I love. Duan Xingchen, my 3rd grand uncle who'd crippled himself for me once and had no illusions left about how this world repays patience, backed me flat. The boy's right, he said. A cornered rat that bites gets left alone. A patient one gets eaten at leisure. The council took the vote, and the doctrine with it, and I went to buy a sword to swing it. I bought a Taichu sword embryo from the shop for the coming fight, a mid-grade sacred artifact that suppresses an enemy of full realm and grows with its wielder towards something called a Chaos Supreme Treasure. Though I couldn't bind it yet, it needed longer nurturing. And I joined the march hidden, neither as myself nor as the bronze mask, wearing a white doll face and faking a nascent soul, because I wanted to feel, with my own hands, exactly how a soul transformation enemy died against me. What I didn't know was that a very patient spider had built a web in the Li Feng Palace and hung our whole leadership in the middle of it. The wheelchair man, the national teacher, the grand tutor, a creature named Shi Wuying, was secretly an agent of the Kanglan sect, the last of the 5 still breathing. He'd orchestrated all of it, the Helan rumor and the Li Feng frame both, and he'd built a kill box, 12 soul transformation late ambushers, 4 from Kanglan and 8 borrowed from the northern sects, hidden behind spirit sense blocking masks, waiting to annihilate our ancestors the moment we attacked. He'd even turned Shu Tianrui into a knife against his own father, whispered him toward killing the emperor in the chaos and taking the throne as Kanglan's puppet, and demanded, as a loyalty test, that the prince hand over a humiliating tribute to prove he'd sacrifice anyone and anything for power. Shu Tianrui agreed to all of it. That's the whole of him, in one line. A man who'd sell any person alive for a crown. And in the middle of Ji Wuying's plotting, he said a name that stopped me cold when I heard it later. Sky Shatterer Dragon. Our missing old ancestor. The whole conspiracy, it turned out, had a private vendetta at its root, and the root had our old ancestor's name on it. The war opened exactly the way I'd promised the council it would, and then it sprang shut exactly the way Zi Wuying had promised his. Feng Tianyun's host came down on the Li Feng capital out of a clear sky and declared the royal line ended before a single soldier could be mustered to stop it. Momentum over strength, the doctrine I'd argued for. No time granted for a desperate last stand because there was no time granted for anything. He cut down the Shu family ancestors with the giant spirit sword, 1 stroke apiece. And the emperor of Li Feng, Yongshuan, abandoned by the son he'd raised, did a thing I did not expect and have not forgotten. He threw himself onto Feng Tianyun's blade on purpose, chose the sword, because a dead father makes a cleaner, more controllable puppet emperor than a living one who might someday object to the strings. His own boy had arranged it that way. That was the family we'd come to end. Then the trap sprang. 12 soul transformation. Late cultivators tore off spirit sense blocking masks all at once. 4 from the Kanglin sect, 8 borrowed from the Northern Raiders, and the kill box closed on our leadership between one breath and the next. 5 of them pinned Feng Chang all together, because even a void refinement cultivator can be held by 5 who don't care which of them dies doing it. 3 swarmed Feng Tianyun. 4 fell on our Heavenly Sword and Jade Snow allies and had them bleeding inside 3 exchanges. It was a good trap. Patiently built, cleanly sprung. For about 2 seconds, it was working beautifully. Then the white doll masked nascent soul that nobody in the whole capital had thought worth watching, the spare body in the back rank, faking a realm 3 full stages below his own, stepped up and hit one of the elders swarming Feng Tianyun hard enough to send him 1,000 meters through the air and a palace wall. Me. I'd arranged the moment with the old farmer in advance down to the timing of the step. And a continent's worth of witnesses got to watch a nascent soul throw a soul transformation elder through a building like a sack of wet washing, and every calculation on that field turned over at once. Freed of one attacker, Feng Tianyun cut down the other 2. Feng Chang stopped being gentle with his 5. I went through my own share of the ambushers with the falling star swordplay, a heaven-tier art none of the watching sects could place on a nascent soul, and while they were still trying to understand what they were looking at, I found Shu Tianrui. He'd grabbed a palace servant to hold in front of himself because of course he had. I tapped his cultivation sealed, let the servant go, and let the prince talk, and the prince, offered the choice between his dignity and his skin, did not hesitate for even a heartbeat. "It was Zi Wu Ying," he screamed, loud enough to reach the back of the crowd. "The Grand Tutor, the national teacher, he's Kanglin's man, he built all of it. The fairy rumor and the ruins theft both. The 4 masked elders are Kanglin's, they're his. I only did what He handed me the whole architecture of the frame, trying to buy back a single breath of life, right down to the last brick I most needed. That Si Wu Ying had already slipped away, home to the Kanglin sect, the last of the 5 still breathing. I made the Crown Prince of Lifeng say all of it again, slowly, in front of the entire watching continent, so no one could ever again mistake whose rumor had nearly gotten my sect erased. It cleared our name in a single afternoon. It is remarkable how fast the truth can travel once you've got a prince screaming it. One of the Tianshuan Grand Elders, a man named Shu Qi, decided he would rather die than kneel to me, so he chose the ugliest exit a cultivator has. He self-destructed his own nascent soul, the seed and root of everything he was, and charged, a small sun kindling at arm's length, enough raw force to flatten what was left of the Lifeng capital and everyone still standing in it. I didn't dodge. There were disciples behind me, ours, young ones too slow to clear the blast, so I did the one thing that keeps them alive. I stepped in, wrapped the detonation as close to my own body as I could hold it, and ate the whole thing. Feng Tianyun was too far across the field to reach me, and I heard him, the kind old farmer who'd bet a sect on me, strike himself hard enough to bruise, roaring, "Why did I let little Yan chase this one alone?" And Bai Shiyun ran toward the crater, into the settling fire, in a silence I could feel from inside the flames, the aloof, unshakable eldest sister, the female bodhisattva who has raised her voice maybe twice in 400 years, running headlong into a fireball with the whole world ending behind her eyes. And then I walked out of the crater without a scratch, brushing ash off one sleeve, and I watched her stop dead 6 feet from me, and I watched a century of that woman's careful stillness crack straight down the middle. Not into tears. She won't do tears in front of people, but into something rawer. A single ragged breath and a look that told me precisely what I was going to be to her for the rest of a very long life. She didn't say a word. She just reached out and closed one hand hard around my wrist, taking the pulse of a man she'd already watched die, and did not let go of it for a long, long time. Chaos Divine Demon Body, plus 15 minutes of the Celestial Protection Shield still ticking from my newbie pack. A soul transformation self-destruct is a lot, but it is not 15 minutes of total invincibility a lot. I killed 3 more of the ambushers barehanded, tanking their blows on the way in, 12 masked assassins, and better than 8 of them dead, and 0 profound spirit sect deaths because we fight as one body and our nascent souls rove the field pulling each other out of fire. 2 of the dead assassins, unmasked, turned out to be Kanglin sect elders who'd faked weakness, proof, for the watching continent, that Kanglin held the fairies' inheritance all along. Thief crying thief. I hung their bodies up in front of the region and let all that greed and suspicion pour off us and onto the Kanglin sect, the last of the 5. When it was over, Feng Tianyun, the kind farmer who'd bet a sect on me, handed me the sect's direction without asking a single question about how I'd become what I'd become. "I'll just kill people for you," he said, in the tone of a man who's guessed his grandson has a great and terrible secret and has decided he doesn't need to know it to love him. I've never told him. I think that's the most either of us can bear. and in the quiet after, I finally bound the Taichu sword embryo, and its sword spirit turned out to be a little girl. A pink jade toddler no taller than my forearm, blinking up at me from inside the blade, a divine weapon in the shape of a child, growing slowly toward a chaos supreme treasure. I named her Xiaoling. When Xiaoling appears, the old line goes, all things perish. She called me master and asked if I'd brought her anything to eat. I was going to walk into fire for that little sword. I still would. I'd cleared the eastern region, I'd cleared my name, and the last enemy of the 5 was hiding behind the fairy's inheritance. So I gathered 9 sects across 3 domains and went to take it and walked straight into the strangest, deepest place I had ever seen. The Kanglin sect was far too clever to fight 9 sects at their own gate, so they didn't. They bought them. Their old ancestor stepped out to meet us, Kang Shiwan, a half-step void refinement cultivator. Remember him, he comes back into all of this, and he didn't reach for a weapon. He reached for the one thing greedy men can never refuse. Why fight at all, he said, unrolling it for the assembled sects like a merchant unrolling silk across a counter. The fairy's technique is real, the location of her treasure is real. And I will share both, freely, gladly, with every sect standing here. A pause, a thin smile that didn't reach his eyes. Every sect except the 3 eastern ones who dragged this war to my gate. Swear a 10-year heavenly Tao oath never to raise a hand against Kanglin and walk home rich men. Or stand with the profound spirit sect and walk home with nothing but the warm pleasure of their company. I watched 6 of the 9 sects change sides inside the length of that one speech. Greed always takes the deal. That's the whole of what makes it greed. Only a couple of upright leaders refused to turn their coats, Wei Hai of the Lingxiao sword sect chief among them, and I saluted each of them across the field and wrote their names in the good half of the folder, the half I don't open as often as I should. Then I took the 10-year truce myself over Hua Jin's furious objection, because marching straight into a tide that strong is just an elaborate way of drowning, and revenge, unlike greed, keeps. I filed the Kanglin sect under later. By now you know exactly how reliable that folder is. The treasure was in a place called the Tianling Forbidden Zone, a battlefield of the demon extermination war, mountains flattened into canyons, and inside it a hidden trial realm, a whole small world sealed behind an ancient gate that only geniuses under 500 could enter. Kanglin had already lost over 100 young prodigies in there for a single technique, and when they opened their vault to prove the deal, I saw 2 things I needed. Sangrade spirit crystals, the exact medicine my eldest sister Bai Xiun had to have to grow, and, sitting among them, a purple crystal that only I could recognize because only I had a shop that named it, an exquisite immortal crystal, the precise key to awakening Lin Yuexi's physique. 5 million luck in the shop. I couldn't buy it and I couldn't snatch it under the oath, so I'd have to be cleverer than that. And then the 6th daughter of destiny walked up, looked me dead in the eye, and told me I was a fickle cripple, Li Mingyu, the #1 prodigy of the whole Southern region, the only woman among the celebrated 5 sons of the South, and the panel over her head read, Daughter of Destiny, age 320, nascent soul late, primordial divine phoenix body, a thread of the ancestral phoenix bloodline, a body that grows stronger in sunlight, a potential to one day become an undying thing out of legend. She was playful and baby-voiced and dimpled and gloriously, catastrophically naive, and she'd already made up her whole mind about me. So you're the famous Luo Zhou. She gave me a once-over like a disappointing menu. 3 wives already, and a 4th on a leash, and the #1 prodigy of the Little Eastern puddle. My sword sister speaks well of you, so I'll be polite about it. But where I come from, a man who collects women the way a magpie collects buttons isn't a prodigy. He's a cautionary tale. Then she turned her back on me entirely and swept off arm in arm with Lan Xuanji, the 2 of them already thick as thieves over a shared love of good swords and better wine, leaving me to appreciate that she'd managed to adore my fiancé and despise me inside the same 60 seconds, which is genuinely difficult, and she'd done it without visible effort. What she didn't know, what made me keep my face very carefully still, was that she'd slipped away from her own sect for 12 days for exactly one reason: to secretly spar the famous ghost-masked man, whom she idolized, who was, of course, me. I now knew 6 daughters of destiny, at least half of whom currently wanted to hit me with something heavy, and my landlord had entirely stopped pretending it wasn't thrilled about the whole arrangement. I made a deal with her. She'd get her sex ancestor to quietly buy that purple crystal off Kanglin for me, and I'd arrange her spar with the masked man. Then we all went into the trial realm, me as the bronze mask, with Feng Chang at my shoulder and Xuanji and Ming Yu beside me, and it was the deepest, oldest, ugliest thing I'd ever walked into. Inside was a whole small world, a primeval forest under a false sky, and a mountain that pierced straight through that sky and kept going, a stairway to heaven so tall that 40 or 50,000 meters was only halfway up. The entry scattered everyone far apart, and the sky was patrolled by countless nascent divinity eagles and redbirds, order keepers, striking anyone who dared to fly, herding every trial taker down into the killing forest. That's how Kanglin lost 100 prodigies. I, on the other hand, crushing soul transformation power in a body built for slaughter, was the apex predator of that forest, and I tore through 100,000 miles of it in half an hour to reach Li Mingyu's stalled position, because a group of rival geniuses had cornered her over an opportunity, and she'd been hurt. Not by them, as it turned out. Some of them were too busy being smitten with her to remember they'd come to murder the masked man. She'd been wounded deeper, and worse. When I took her hand to diagnose her, she flushed scarlet, which under the circumstances I found genuinely charming. I found her newborn, nascent soul awareness shattered by something called a green dragon shadow, a soul nurtured in a crystal skull, a near-incurable wound that would stall her combat power for life without a rare soul medicine. The strange part, the dragon had half struck her and then fled as if it hadn't wanted to finish the job, as if it recognized something, both of them carrying the blood of the 4 ancient divine beasts, her phoenix and its dragon. I promised her I'd cure it. Privately, I knew it meant 3 more years and a mountain of luck I didn't have yet, because the debt clock rules me and I never forget it. But I looked at that naive, brave, wounded girl, and I promised anyway, and I meant it, which is the only kind of promise I make. The cavern they'd cornered her in was a demon race base from the Demon Extermination War, a pentagon altar carved with demon script and figures of beasts trampling humans, and at its heart a blood formation feeding a pit of dried powder that had once been the blood of hundreds of thousands of the dead. I don't linger on the pit. You don't need me to. I just felt the old cold rage come up my spine, the one that agrees with a certain forbidden ancestor about what should be done to the things that built it. Xiaoling shattered the unbreakable formation in one strike. She suppresses everything a grade, my little sword, and I took the crystal skull for her to absorb, the green dragon's vessel, another meal on her long road to becoming a chaos supreme treasure. Then the ambush I'd known was coming since the entrance finally sprang. 3 of them. Rival 6 heroes and 5 sons, the North's and South's proudest young names, and 30-odd disciples at their backs, sent in by their grand elders with one quiet instruction: corner the ghost-masked man somewhere with no witnesses and make certain he doesn't come out. Kanglin had even handed them a fixed teleport point to manage it, and kept the point secret from everyone else. They came into the cavern grinning, sure of the numbers, 33 against 1 masked stranger and a wounded girl. You should have stayed on your little stage, Eastern dog, their leader told me, fanning his people into a half circle. Nobody out there will ever know what happened to you down here. Hand over the treasures and the woman, and we'll make it quick. I let them get all of it out. Then I turned the crystal skull over in my hand, unhurried, and the willow leaf, and the little sword, so every one of them could see exactly what they were about to die over, because I like my Tao heart to have its reasons written down somewhere I can point to them afterward. You came a very long way, I said, to teach me that 33 cowards in the dark still come to 33 cowards in the dark. Thank you for the lesson. I'll keep my half brief. Xiaoling dropped every one of them a full realm. My little sword humbles anything a grade beneath it, and I drew the falling star swordplay and cut once. 1 stroke across the whole half circle, and some 30 of them were simply no longer standing. The 2 surviving leaders threw down their blades and swore heavenly Tao oaths of loyalty faster than I have ever watched men swear anything, and those 2 I let live. You never do know when you'll want a pair of eyes already sitting inside an enemy sect. And Li Mingyu, the southern prodigy who'd spent the whole trip announcing to anyone in earshot that she despised the fickle-masked cripple, fought at my shoulder through the entire thing without a heartbeat's hesitation, loyal to the mask well before she'd admit to liking the man behind it. When it was done, I felt the number over her head, the flat, insulting 0 it had shown since the day we met, tick, very quietly, upward. We raided the Guardian's nests on the way up the mountain, and it taught me one more thing about the world I'd wandered into. The great order-keeping eagles hoarded saint-grade spirit crystals by the 1,000 to incubate their young, a fortune stacked in every nest, and when I came through and emptied them, the other eagles watched their neighbors robbed blind and never lifted a single wing to stop me. Why would they? They're creatures of the demon world, where the whole of the law is that the strong eat the weak, and the weak have no claim on anyone. A robbed eagle is just a weak eagle, and a weak eagle is nobody's problem. I stripped nest after nest, and not one of them moved to help another, and I thought about the 10,000 disciples who'd flooded home through our gate to stand and die beside each other, and I understood in my gut, for the first time, exactly what humanity actually has that's worth defending. It isn't strength. The demons have more of that. It's that we come home for each other. Tens of thousands of saint crystals. Enough to grow my eldest sister Bai Xiun for years. Enough to hand the allied disciples by the fistful and bind them tighter to us. Enough that her power-up was secured many times over. And somewhere in all that climbing, on a wine-warmed night on the way in, Feng Cheng told me the oldest story in the world, and it rearranged me. The demon extermination war, 100,000 years ago, was started by a single human, a towering power named Luo Wuchen, who set out to drive the demon races off the human continents, the demons who plundered human luck and ate human beings. At the war's worst, humanity was losing 7 demon emperors against 3 human tribulation realm masters, and it should have been the end of us. And Luo Wuchen alone turned to face 5 demon emperors, and burned his own life to the wick to drag them down into death with him, and saved the entire human race, and then vanished, dead or sleeping, no one knows, and the world, being the world, forgot him. Forgot the man who bought them 100,000 years of mournings. I sat with that for a long time. Because there was a thing my grandfather told me once when I was small, before everyone I was born to was slaughtered in a single night, that our family had a towering ancestor we were forbidden to name, that we were only ever to call ourselves the Luo family of Dongshan Commandery, and never, ever more than that. Luo Wuchen. I've never confirmed it, and I've never needed to. Some truths you feel land in your chest like a key into a lock you didn't know was there, and it hardened the creed I'd been circling my whole life. Heroes should not be forgotten. Family should not be left behind. I would make my sect the first power of this whole realm, and I would do to its enemies exactly what my ancestor did to his, and then, because someone has to, I would rule it well enough that the next hero doesn't get erased. Even Li Mingyue, who'd come to despise me, went quiet listening to a masked man say it. Then we reached the top of the mountain, and the real trial began, and the tower carved into the peak had a name written in human characters on a demon race monument, and I stopped thinking about anything else for a long, long time. The Demon God Tower. 9 floors cut from the living rock, and I climbed every one of them, and I'll take you up it the way I went up it, fast, because the tower does not slow down for anyone. Floor 1 was gravity, 1,000 times normal weight, cultivation sealed, pressure a full realm above your own. It's a floor built to crush anything whose body isn't already a weapon, pure body refining hell, and it's where Kanglin's prodigies had been dying for centuries. The stairs went up into the dark, and the air itself sat on your shoulders like a dead ox. I carried Lan Xuanji and Li Mingyu to the first landing where they could rest. Then, I went up alone. And here's the thing about my chaos divine demon body. Sealed down to raw meat and bone, no cultivation to hide behind. It didn't suffer on that floor. It woke up. The gravity climbed. 1,000 times. 4,000. 16. My knees hit the stone and I got up. 32,000. And my blood turned to boiling magma in my veins, and I got up. 64,000 times a man's weight pressing down on a body with no key to lift it, and instead of breaking, my body did something I didn't know it could. It reached its ultimate mode. My bones cracked one after another and were replaced. Golden ones, a purple gold mist welling up and healing the breaks faster than the floor could make them. Spiritual energy stopped going to my dantian and soaked straight into my flesh, my muscle, my new gold bones, until I could have killed a nascent soul with my bare hands and no cultivation at all. I stood up at the top of floor 1, first to do it in centuries. The tower gave me a prize for it, the heavenly demon body refining art, heaven rank, high grade, a method a man can ride all the way to immortality. And my very first thought, standing there rebuilt in gold, was, this one's for the ancestors. Give this to Feng Tianyun and Duan Xingchen and watch them get terrifying. My second thought was that my clothes had not survived 64,000 times gravity, so I climbed the rest of the way improvising a scarf, which I feel is the correct ratio of glory to indignity for my whole life. Far away, while I climbed, an old man was burning his own lifespan to read the future off a cracked turtle shell, and what he read changed everything that comes after this story. The dean of the Ascension Dao Academy, a Hadao realm immortal named Yuan Hao, though I didn't know his name yet, divined a coming catastrophe. Ancient willow descends over heaven and earth. Dragon scales appear in the azure sky. 13 numbers of a thing called Xuanji, all embracing a single thread of spring. He read it as humanity pushed to a thread of survival, a demon counterattack, an echo of the war, 100,000 years gone, and a woman, or 13 women, marked Xuanji, standing at the center of it. So he threw the academy's doors open wide, forbade every sect on the continent from fighting each other, and sent 12 elders out in secret to hunt for ancient willow, for dragon scales, for Xuanji. Hold all of that. It's the shape of my whole future, and it was closing around me while I was up a demon tower wearing a scarf. Floor 2 was endurance. Illusory beasts, wave after wave after wave. Cultivation still sealed, a test aimed straight at the foundation of a person's spirit. Because the trick of it isn't strength, it's that the beasts never stop coming, and a mind wears through long before a body does. 91 of the continent's proudest young geniuses walked onto floor 2. 22 walked off it. The rest broke somewhere in the middle, minds sanded down by an enemy that came back faster than they could put it down, and were spat back down the stairs, gray and shaking and done. The beast couldn't scratch my new gold hide, not the first wave, not the 1,000th. So I spent floor 2 doing the one thing the floor was truly built to test. I practiced not being bored. And I'll be honest with you, that was the hardest part, and I very nearly lost to a phantom tiger, not because it could hurt me, but because I'd stopped paying attention halfway through to admire my own new golden knuckles. That one, in the end, was easy. Floor 3 was where the tower stopped playing. Floor 3 was not easy. Floor 3 nearly killed me without touching my body, because it reached into the one room in me I keep locked. It replayed the massacre. The night the Luo clan died, my whole family, one night before my 8th birthday, laid out in front of me exactly as I found them. And a voice moving through it, patient, reasonable, whispering the one sentence I have spent 300 years refusing to say to myself: if you'd been stronger, they'd be alive. You had the talent. You left to buy a gift. You are the reason they're dead. You are the sinner. And I want to tell you, that floor knew me. It wasn't a cheap illusion. It was the exact voice from the back of my own skull, the one that's been talking since I was 8, and for one long moment I stood in the blood of everyone I was born to, and I believed it, all the way down. And then my nascent soul opened its mouth and spoke. I've never told anyone this part. The little seated figure at the core of me, the truest, deepest self a cultivator has, opened its eyes on its own and recited a line of the Tao scripture in a voice like the bottom of a great bell. Heavy is the root of light. Stillness is the master of restlessness. And I found my own voice under it, and I roared the rest of it over the massacre, over the whispering, over 8-year-old me in the doorway. I do not fear the past. I do not dread what's coming. I was a child. I am not a child now. And whoever did this, I'm going to be there on the day it costs you everything. The illusion shattered like a dropped mirror, and a golden sigil burned itself onto my nascent soul's brow. 16 strokes out of 108, a mark no one in the history of cultivation has ever seen a nascent soul grow. The tower gave me a reward for surviving the worst room in my own head. A single jade willow leaf, humming with a great Tao aura, richer than any sacred artifact I owned. The ancient willow of the prophecy. Though I didn't know that yet, I only knew I'd walked into my family's grave and walked out with a leaf in my hand and a strange new light behind my eyes. Floor 4 split us up, 8 ancient Tao paths, and each of us took the one that fit. I took the great path of chaos. Lan Xuanji took metal for her sword body. Li Mingyu took fire for her phoenix blood. And in the chaos maze, a real place, not an illusion, thousands of identical paths hiding a single thread of true chaos Tao. I meditated for a month and watched the sigil on my nascent soul grow from 7 strokes to 10, and I saw a vision I have never been able to unsee. On my left, the future, a dozen and more peerless women, my women, the ones I had and the ones I hadn't met yet, all of them cold, puppet blank, arrayed behind a purple-haired goddess in white with an empress's Tao aura, and the goddess raised a golden wooden sword that became a willow leaf and tried to kill me with it. On my right, the past, the massacre again, 13 women, a purple-haired antagonist, a willow, the prophecy, with my face in the middle of it. I swore, quietly, in a maze at the top of a demon tower, that I would change that future. I'm still swearing it. Floor 5 belonged to Xuanji. A sword tomb, hundreds of thousands of graves, none of them named, each one a single broken blade thrust into the ground, and each blade still screaming. The leftover killing intent of a sword cultivator who died in the Great War 100,000 years ago, so much of it packed into that hanging mountain that it would bleed a nascent soul white at 100 paces. Deng Han's group tried to enter and started to bleed from their pores before they'd gone 30 steps. Lan Xuanji walked in like she was coming home. Because the sword intents didn't attack her, they worshipped her. Her innate, immaculate sword body is the exact thing every one of those dead cultivators had spent their lives trying to become, a sword heart born whole, flawless, and the murderous ghosts of a war tomb took one look at her and gentled and bowed and let her pass. She walked us through the killing field untouched, all of us tucked inside 3 paces of her, and I just watched her do it and thought about how I'd traveled 12 days to break off my engagement to this woman. At the tomb's heart, a sword rose. Cayenne, proud, old as the war, an empress of a blade. Xiaoling suppressed it. My little sword humbles everything a grade, and Xuanji reached out and bonded it with her sword heart, and a drop of her blood, and a golden lotus opened in the middle of her sword body, her natal weapon, the Qinglian sword. And then she did the thing I'll remember. She turned to all those hundreds of thousands of nameless broken blades, and she saluted them. One long, formal bow, sword held level, a living sword saintess honoring the sword dead, sending them back to their graves with the only respect any of them had gotten in 100,000 years. The whole tomb went quiet around her. I watched the woman I'd come to abandon become a sword immortal in front of me, and I understood all the way that I had made the single best deal of my entire cheating life the day I failed to dump her. The grave at the very center held the greatest human sword cultivator of the war, a woman whose name all but rhymed with hers, and that inheritance poured into Xuanji like a river finally reaching the sea. The only shadow on the whole floor, the sword intense that loved Xuanji, went cold around Li Mingyu, avoided her, pulled back from her like she was the wrong shape, as if they knew something about her blood that the rest of us hadn't been told yet. They did. And on floor 6 I found out what. Floor 6 was a canyon, one wall a sheet of white flame that burns the body, the other wall black ice that freezes the soul. You pass it by grasping the yin-yang Dao, a Hedao stage insight the floor expected out of children, and it rioted the whole canyon, specifically around Li Mingyu. The flame reached for her, the ice reached for her, as if it knew her, so I told her the thing I'd felt in her since the day I took her hand to diagnose a soul wound. She carried a phoenix bloodline. And the phoenix is one of the 4 ancestor spirits of the demon race. She broke a little hearing it. I watched it happen. The naive, brave, dimpled girl went white, and the fear came up in her all at once, that she was demon, an anomaly, a monster wearing a woman, a thing the human world would cast out the second it knew. She'd spent her whole life the #1 prodigy of the South. And in one sentence, I'd made her a stranger to herself. Xuanji got there before I could, sheathed her sword, took the southern girl by both shoulders, and said the only true thing there is to say about it. Your blood is not your character. I've watched you for a month. Your character is entirely your own, and it's a good one, and I'd stake my sword heart on it. And I said the rest, that I had a phoenix, a dragon, and half the demon-tied bloodlines in the realm orbiting me already, and that I did not care 1 grain where a person's blood came from, only what they did with the life on top of it. And then, because the floor demanded the yin-yang Dao to pass, and because it would heal her, and because she looked at me and asked, "One delicate private hour I won't narrate, and one delicate line is all it gets," I helped her phoenix bloodline wake. A flame mark bloomed on her brow, an empress's mark, 7 colors of fire, and the same divine flame that woke her blood reached into her and burned her incurable soul wound clean out of her, the wound I'd promised to spend 3 years and a fortune curing, gone in a single hour of her own fire. She became my 6th husband, she called me, dimpled and shy and not despising me at all anymore, and somewhere in my chest the machine that counts love began, at long last, to count her upward too. Her phoenix eye opened not long after. Chuck's a top ancestral ability, sees through illusion and karma, catches glimpses of the future, and with it she heard something none of the rest of us could. Far above us, up past the floors we hadn't climbed, on the 9th, a dragon, roaring, furious, and getting angrier. Floor 7 was a mirror, and the mirror showed me 1,000 futures, and every single one of them ended the same way. A cultivator in purple, gold, and black robes, my own face gone older and colder inside the hood, raising a blade and cutting me down for the crime of loving demons, my phoenix, my dragon, my women with their demon-touched blood. In every reflection, the man I was supposed to become executed the man I actually was, and the floor made me feel each death land, patient and personal, and mine. I died in that mirror 8 times, 8 futures where I hesitated or doubted or believed for one fatal second that the cold executioner in the glass had the right of it. And on the 9th, I finally grasped what the floor was truly teaching. The water and softness Tao, the oldest lesson there is. The Tao follows nature, water shapes itself to the stone and outlasts it. So why should a man kneel to a future he hasn't chosen yet? The reflection wasn't a prophecy, it was a threat, and threats are answered, not obeyed. I shattered the mirror with that one thought, took a 3rd jade willow leaf humming with great Tao light, and watched the golden sigil on my nascent soul's brow climb to 12 strokes. Beside me, Li Mingyu heard the dragon roar again, closer now and angrier, and went tense and strange and very quiet, because her phoenix eye had begun whispering to her that whatever was raging up on the 9th floor had an egg near it, and the egg was calling her by name. Floor 8 was the answer to the roar. An altar cradling a teal dragon egg in a nest of immortal-grade materials and 100,000 saint crystals sealed behind a formation even an immortal couldn't crack, and guarded by 2 one-legged wooden statues that Li Mingyu's phoenix eye saw for what they were, immortal puppets, powers that dwarf a void refinement cultivator, and my willow leaves were the keys that drove them. 2 pecks and the unbreakable formation came apart, and inside the egg a hatchling was being strangled by a gray star chain. Someone had ambushed it before it was even born. So I poured my yin-yang energy in and broke the chain and helped a true azure dragon into the world. Not a flood dragon, not a sub-dragon. A pure-blood true dragon. Glazed jade and white-horned, noble past anything in that whole tower, and even newborn it could stand against a golden core. It bonded to me and to Xuanji on sight, and it would not go near Li Mingyue, snarled at her, a dragon and a phoenix refusing each other across 100,000 years of blood, and its birth called down the sky, a ninefold heavenly tribulation, at birth. Because the little dragon's bloodline was that high, a true dragon draws the heavens down on its own head the day it hatches. I could have stepped back and let it face the sky alone. It might even have lived. But a true dragon is a war ally worth a kingdom, and I don't step back from things I've decided to keep. So I chose to shepherd it through. And the second I interfered, the tribulation looked at me instead of the hatchling, and scaled itself to me, to void refinement power, and then passed it, each bolt heavier than the one before. The first bolts I ate standing. I burned the 6 pieces of immortal void star wood from the nest to blunt the lightning. I burned the falling star swordplay. I burned my own chaos body down to the gold bones and let it build back between strikes, cracked ribs, and a body that kept knitting itself shut a half second before the next bolt reopened it, and Xuanji and Mingyu would not run. I told them to run. They stood in the lightning on either side of me and told me, both of them, that if I died on that tower, they'd die on it too. I have been alive for 300 years. I have never been loved the way I was loved on the top of that tower with the sky trying to kill all 3 of us at once. The 8th bolt was the one that should have ended me. I felt it gather, and I knew, the way you know, that my body had nothing left to build back with. And then 2 things happened in the same heartbeat. The green dragon's shadow, the thing that had wounded Li Mingyu, solid now, come roaring down from the 9th floor at last, threw itself into the tribulation to shield the newborn dragon and took the 8th bolt off me, and Li Mingyu's phoenix bloodline tore all the way open. A full 7-colored phoenix rose off her, vast and burning, and flew up to fight the lightning beside the green dragon. A phoenix and a dragon, the 2 ancient enemies, side by side in a golden storm. The 9th bolt came down gold, immortal grade, the sky's final word, and in the heart of that gold cataclysm, 1 single drop of her phoenix blood tore loose from her, and Li Mingyu vanished. A rift opened in the world and closed in the same instant, and she was gone. Not dead, I would learn that later and hold on to it. But gone, torn clean out of this world into somewhere else entirely. I reached for her. I couldn't reach her. I couldn't reach her. And I would have thrown myself into that rift after her without a second thought, except that by the time I turned, there was no rift left to throw myself into, just the burnt top of a tower and a space in the air where a dimpled, brave, naive girl had been standing a breath before. There wasn't. There was just the top of a tower, and a woman missing, and a little dragon on my shoulder, and a fiancé holding me up. And grief, which I don't undercut, so I won't. But the sky had poured a void refinement tribulation's worth of power into a man built to eat it, and grief or not, my body took what the lightning gave. I broke through on the spot, standing in the ash, to the soul transformation realm, the height the whole eastern region hadn't touched in 100,000 years, my nascent soul's sigil climbing from 12 strokes to 16, my dantian finally able to hold the yin-yang tu qi, and Shaoling, feeding on the aftermath, upgrading in my hand to a high-grade sacred artifact. I bonded the little azure dragon, and I stood there at soul transformation, 300 years old, holding a war's worth of power and 1 woman's absence, and I made her a promise too, the kind I keep. I will find you, Mingyu, even if it's in another world, especially then. I left the 9th floor for another day. I walked out of that trial realm with tens of thousands of saint crystals, a heaven-rank body art for my elders, 2 immortal puppets, a sword immortal fiancé, a true dragon, and a hole in the shape of a girl who'd come to spar a masked man and ended up torn out of the world. Li Mingyu's sect ancestor, when I told him privately, checked her soul lamp and found it still lit, alive somewhere, in another world, and when he understood who I really was and what she'd become to me, he grudgingly gave me his blessing, and with it, the exquisite immortal crystal, free, Lin Yuexi's power-up, secured, out of a dead girl's absence that wasn't a death. I'd gone in to rob the last of my enemies and come out a soul transformation cultivator with a continent's worth of secrets and 1 more name written in the folder of debts I intend to pay. And I hadn't even met the man who was about to try to make me his disciple. His name was Yuan Hao, and he was the dean of the Ascension Dao Academy, and he was the only Hadao realm cultivator on the entire Qingyun continent. He divined a great affinity with the ghost-masked man and sent his void refinement senior disciple Zhao Heng to invite me 3 times, and I said no 3 times. I want to be clear about why, because it's the center of me. I am an orphan. A sect nobody thought was worth the trouble spent 100 years bleeding itself white to keep me alive, and never once asked what it would get back. My loyalty was bought and paid for a century ago, and it is not for sale to a bigger, grander institution with better vaults and a nobler mission. Yuan Hao wanted me to serve the greater good of humanity. I already had a good I served, and it had my family's graves on it. So, thank you. No. He was not a man who took no for an answer. He just changed the shape of the question. He introduced me to Ning Ruo, the celestial Buddha maiden, the #1 prodigy of the Western region, a barefoot, serene, orphan-raised girl with eyes like still water, and a panel that made 7, daughter of destiny, age 290, nascent soul, late, 9 heavens Brahma, pure immortal body, born with a Brahma Tao heart, no inner demons, a comprehension of the great Tao that frightened the people who measured it. Yuan Hao had wanted her for his own disciple and chosen the masked man instead, and her master, a sharp-eyed woman named Huo Mei Ying, had responded by ordering Ning Ruo to spar me, which I understood later was the opening move of a marriage scheme, Yuan Hao's plan to bind me to his academy, not with a title but with a wife. She was extraordinary, and I mean that as a cultivator, not as a man. Her master's order was blunt: spar the masked stranger, take his measure, and Ning Ruo obeyed it the way she seemed to do everything, without heat, without hurry. Bare feet flat on the sparring stone, eyes like a lake at dawn. Then she raised her sword, and the whole courtyard dropped a degree, because her 9 heavens sword formation unfolded above anything the continent's proudest young monsters had shown me in the entire tournament. A lattice of 9 turning blades in a pattern that would have carved a nascent soul late into ribbons and apologized to none of them. I shattered it with one lazy slash, keeping most of what I am hidden under the mask, and then the thing happened that told me who she was. She lost, cleanly, in front of witnesses, to a stranger, and not one crack showed in her Tao heart. She lowered the sword, put her palms together, and bowed, serene, complete, entirely at peace with the outcome. If you know cultivators at all, you know how vanishingly rare that is. Everyone breaks a little when they lose. The ego leaks out through the eyes and the jaw. She just bowed, as though she'd learned precisely what she'd come to learn, and was grateful for the teaching. And somewhere under all that stillness, watching a masked man scoop his laughing fiancé up with a hand at the small of her back, the Buddha maiden felt the first small stone drop into her still lake, one ring spreading slowly across the water, and had no idea what to call it, or that the thing even had a name. Yuan Hao, meanwhile, told me a thing that turned my stomach and lit my blood at once. That trial realm I just looted, the tower, the blood pit, wasn't a fairy's cave at all. It was one of the 3 holy lands of the demon race, where they forged their monsters, and the pit of human blood powder was a slaughter blood pool, where the remains of the human dead were rendered into pills that let demons speed their way into human form. 100,000 years ago, they plundered our luck and ate our people and pressed our dead into medicine, and the academy exists, Yuan Hao said, watching my face, to make humanity strong enough to one day reclaim the bewitching continent and finish what a certain ancestor started. Luo Wuchen's unfinished work. He said the name like it was a normal name. I kept my face still and my rage stiller and added one more reason to a list I'd been keeping my whole life. Then he divined for me, because his divination is one of the 3 greatest in the whole realm and never fails, and I had 2 people to find. First, Li Mingyu. He read her hairpin and found her to the southwest, beyond the bewitching continent in the demon realm itself, and the hexagram read, impossibly, that she turned misfortune to blessing, that she rose like a phoenix, alive, evolving. Somewhere I would have to walk into the demon world to reach, a trip that had nearly killed even Luo Wuchen. Fine, add it to the folder. I'd walk into hell for that dimpled, brave, naive girl, and I'd told her so on top of a tower, and I don't say things I don't mean. And then my sisters arrived, and for a little while the whole world went warm. Feng Tianyun brought the family up to the central continent. Bai Shiyun at nascent soul middle now, Lin Yuexi, my 3 loyal followers, the little azure dragon riding my shoulder like a smug jade cat. The central continent has always looked down its nose at the eastern region, and some pedigreed local noble girl took one glance at our travel-dusty delegation and said something bright and cutting about eastern bumpkins wandering in above their station. My gentle-faced eldest sister, the female bodhisattva, cold as a mountain lake, who has maybe raised her voice twice in 400 years, set down her tea, crossed the courtyard, thrashed the girl so precisely and so completely that the whole snickering crowd discovered urgent business elsewhere, and then came back and picked her tea up again as though she'd stepped away to admire a flower. Even Zhao Heng, Yuan Hao's own void refinement senior disciple, arrived and deferred to Feng Tianyun the way a junior defers to an elder, and the eastern region's pride, in a place that had spent 10,000 years sneering at it, stood up a full inch straighter. There was a reunion. There was private time afterward, graciously arranged, because my women have turned the logistics of a large and complicated love into a genuine art form, and I have learned to stop asking how it gets done. And in the middle of all that warmth, I put the exquisite immortal crystal into Lin Yuexi's hands, the purple crystal I'd chased across a trial realm and out of a vanished girl's last blessing to bring home, and watched her exquisite immortal body begin, at last, after 380 years of waiting, to wake. It was the second time in a single month I got to hand a woman I loved the exact thing she had needed for centuries and could never have found alone. There is no number in the whole system shop worth more than her face. In the instant she understood what it was. I courted Ningruo slowly. She has no interest in romance, wants only her master's peace, and one day, to reach the heavenly realm and see her dead mother again, and I understood every word of that. 2 orphans across a tea table. So, I offered her something easier than a marriage. Be my friend, take your time, we'll see. She agreed, because she doesn't dislike me, and because I'm the only person she's ever met who wanted nothing from her stillness except to sit inside it a while. My debt clock, for the record, purred at the prospect of a 7th 27 more years of solvency if her heart ever turned, and I noted that, the way I always note it, and I set it down and courted her honestly anyway, because the machine only pays out for true things, and I long ago stopped being able to tell where my scheming ends and my heart begins. Maybe there's no line. Maybe there never was. Then Yuan Hao divined for the last people on my list, my master, Bai Yungxi, and my 3rd and 5th senior sisters, Duan Jingfei and Lan Qiusha, missing all this time, and I watched his calm old face slide from serene to grave to something close to fear. They were in the northern reaches of the Changming continent, he said, trapped, in a water marsh, a lake, under great misfortune. The hexagram came out dark. The water mirror seals the 3rd month, only a sliver of light in the sky, and luck returns to the Zhuan wheel. That last line hooked into me and wouldn't let go because Zhuan wheel rhymed with Xuanji, and Xuanji was the prophecy, and my master is a daughter of destiny, so whose luck exactly was returning to whose wheel? I didn't have an answer. I still don't, all the way, but I had a direction, and a master a year lost, and a promise made in a poolside cave that I had every intention of collecting, and that was enough to move me. I'd go alone. My sisters begged to come, my whole family did, and I refused them, because I'd already lost Li Mingyu to a rift I couldn't follow her into, and I would not lose another. Bai Xiun gathered the others to stay and grow strong, saying the thing that's become our law. From now on, our family faces things together, which is exactly why she let me go do the one thing I had to do apart. To reassure the elders, I wasn't walking into death. I sparred Feng Chang, the Shen family's void refinement guardian, and matched him, 300 years old, fighting at the void refinement level, a freak the likes of which the realm hadn't grown in 100,000 years. And the whole academy went quiet, and Feng Tianyun finally let me go. I asked Yuan Hao to shield the sect and my women while I was gone, and the old schemer agreed instantly, because a man who wants you for a disciple is a very reliable bodyguard for the things you love. Ho Meiying forced Ningruo to travel with me, the marriage scheme again, patient as weather, and on my way out, 6 ghosts from my old life came crawling up the mountain to be forgiven. My other followers, the 7 who'd left me the day I fell, 6 of them had heard I was back and come to beg pardon, and my loyal Wei Guang, nascent soul middle now, standing where the abandoners were too weak to stand, turned them away cold. You left the crippled man, he told them. Now you're not even strong enough to stand behind him. He won't see you. And I let him say it, and felt nothing I need to apologize for, and thought about the 3 who'd stayed, and how the whole of a person's worth is just what they do on the day it costs them something. Then I got on a boat with the Buddha maiden and sailed for the place where my master was drowning, and the last stretch of this story began, the one I'd have traded every treasure in that tower to reach a year sooner. The Buddha maiden did not want to be melted. I melted her anyway on that boundary sea crossing, and it's the gentlest campaign I've ever run. She walks barefoot, a Buddhist affectation, or maybe just hers, so in a little mortal seaside town, I bought her deerskin boots she didn't ask for, and a jade hairpin, and I took her hand, so you don't get lost, which she saw through completely and allowed anyway, reciting a heart-calming mantra under her breath, and calling me flirtatious and shameless, which, fair. And piece by piece her orphan story came out, raised by her grandmother by the sea, her father killed by a passing immortal who didn't even slow down to do it, her whole small life aimed at one thing: cultivate high enough to reach the heavenly realm and see her dead mother's face again. 2 orphans on a boat, each carrying a grave. I stopped scheming somewhere in there and just walked beside her, and the stillness that had never let anyone in let me in, a little, the way a lake lets in the moon. In that same town, we met a child, Yang Xianxia, Xiao maybe 9 years old, selling herbs to keep a dying mother alive, her father killed by a cultivator for the crime of standing in the wrong spot. Ningruo healed the mother without being asked. I left them supplies and spirit stones. And the Buddha maiden looked at that small fierce girl and saw, I think, her own reflection at that age, the orphan who got lucky enough to be picked up, and she took Xiao as her first disciple and kept the mother with her, and I watched the coldest woman in the West go warm all the way through, and I thought, there, that's the thread. Every one of these stories has a warm thread, and if you can't find it, you're not looking. Xiao called Ningruo master and called me grandmaster, which was technically wrong and which I did not correct even once, because I'm a bad influence and she is a good kid. Then we boarded the great ship for the 20-day crossing to the Changming continent. The boundary sea presses down on your spirit and your soul the whole way, so even monsters travel it quietly. And on the 11th day, a dragon broke the hull's formation open and taught me exactly what people are worth when the price gets high enough. It was an azure spirit flood dragon, transformation god late, one breath short of becoming a void refinement beast, and it was hungry. It cracked the ship's barrier like an egg, coiled its length around us in the black water, and it did not simply attack. It made an offer in a voice that filled the whole flooding hold. I am a merciful lord, it said. I will let 5 of you live. Only 5. Choose them, hand me the rest, and the ship sails on. And I watched a hold full of frightened people turn into something worse than frightened. The strong ones did the arithmetic out loud. A ship's steward named Song Bo, soul transformation middle, the highest cultivation aboard, started pointing. You, the old woman, that one's no loss. Feed the beast the weak ones first. And a red-robed old man and one more took up the counting beside him, coldly, briskly, sorting which of their fellow passengers would go into the dark so the sum came out in their own favor. Only 2 people on that entire ship refused to play the game, a fat old man and his wife. No cultivation between them, nothing to bargain with but their consciences, and they offered those instead, planting themselves in front of a stranger's child. And Song Bo, having settled his list of the doomed, looked at Ning Ruo and decided that one of the 5 survivors would be her, as his companion, whether she agreed to it or not, a place on the raft, at the price of herself. The Buddha maiden is not, it turns out, a passive thing. A dark, ancient sword appeared in her hand, and she went for him herself, evil-slaying, serene and furious at once, and I loved her a little more for it, and then I ended the whole conversation. I one-shot the flood dragon, Xiaoling's realm suppression and a single stroke, and the beast that had held a whole ship hostage floated apart in the current. Then I killed the 2 selfish elders, not for being weak, weakness I forgive, but for choosing, calmly, to gang together and feed other people to a monster to save their own skins, which I don't. And then I killed Song Bo, the steward, even as he screamed the one word he thought would save him, the Jin family, his masters, the great power that backs the boundary sea trade. I killed him anyway, and I did it standing between him and Ning Ruo, taking whatever karma came with his death onto my own name instead of hers, and she watched me do it, and something in her that had been thawing all voyage went quiet and certain and warm. I should tell you about the Jin family, because they're about to matter, and because they're tangled into the oldest thing in me. 100,000 years ago, 3 human masters crossed the tribulation and stood above everyone. Luo Wuchen of the Luo family, mine, I'm nearly sure. Tian Guang, who founded the Dao Academy, and Jin Longshan of the Jin family, 3 peers. And with Luo Wuchen gone to his long sleep or his grave, Jin Longshan is now, in effect, the leader of the entire human race. Which means the great family throwing its weight around the boundary sea, the one whose name a dying steward spat at me like a curse. That family is run by a man who once stood shoulder to shoulder with my own ancestor. I filed the Jin family under later, and the folder for once felt a little heavy. Ning Ruo told me quietly that I should join the academy for its protection now, having just made an enemy of the closest thing the human race has to a king. She wasn't wrong. I still wasn't going to, but I heard her. We reached the Changming coast, and to find the drowning place from Yuan Hao's divination, we went down into a ghost market. I want to describe it, because it told me a thing about the world I hadn't wanted to know. An underground black market, torchlit and endless, where humans and demons traded side by side under one iron rule, enforced by something none of us could see. No fights, no fakes, no exceptions. On pain of a death nobody survived to describe. It should not have existed. Humans and demons are supposed to be each other's oldest and truest enemies. My whole education said so. The Academy's whole mission said so. 100,000 years of war said so. And yet here they were, a horned demon and a human elder haggling politely over the same stall of soul herbs like neighbors at a country fair. Something was rotten under the floor of the world in a shape I couldn't quite make out yet, and I filed the wrongness of it away with everything else. A fox demon broker who called herself Ling Xiao took our commission, a slit-eyed, sharp-smiling creature who quoted me a fair price, and then when I paid it without a single round of haggling, looked at me as though I'd sprouted a second head. She got us what we'd come for, a full map of the place my master was buried alive, the Hanming Sea Abyss, bought from a merchant named Old Shu for 3.8 million spirit stones, and when it was done, I paid Ling Xiao 10 times her fee because I had it, and she'd earned it, and I liked her. And because a man who tips the demons well is a man the demons remember kindly, and I have learned to plant those seeds wherever the ground looks this strange. And then I found her again a few minutes later, on her knees in front of a demon slaver's stall, because the cold, chained foxwoman being sold there was her sister, Mei Shi, the sister, Mei Yue, the little fox. Snow domain spirit foxes from the demon continent, ambushed on a journey, one of them caught and dragged here to be sold like a coat. The slaver played buy one get one, and I paid it and snapped their chains and freed them both and dressed it up as a purchase so the crowd wouldn't ask questions. And then, outside, I let them go. Gave them a fortune in spirit stones and their own 2 lives back and sent them home and asked only that they keep an ear out back in the demon world for the road that leads into the demon realm, because Li Mingyu is somewhere down that road and I collect leads the way I collect debts. The sisters, who had fully expected to be property, could not understand a man who'd buy them just to free them and decided I was the strangest and best thing they'd ever met. And Ning Ruo, watching, said the truest short review of me anyone's ever given. This scoundrel has principles. I do. Not many, but the ones I have, I keep. And every one of them was about to be tested in a hole in the world where a woman I loved had been drowning for a year. Let me tell you where they were because I didn't know it yet, and it's the thing my whole year had been pointed at. Deep under the Hanming Sea abyss, in a cold underground lake, 3 women hung suspended in a formation and had for a very long time. My master, Bai Yunxi. My 3rd senior sister, Duan Jingfei, delicate, sickly pretty, the kind of woman a strong wind should knock over, with a spine of iron under it. My 5th senior sister, Lan Qiusha, sharp-tongued, fierce, the baby of us who never once let anyone forget she outranked them. And out of all 3 of them, minute by minute, month by month, the formation drew colorful silken threads, the very essence of their luck, their destiny, siphoned off into the dark. Jingfei and Qiusha were gaunt and failing. Master, stronger, could only feed them her own energy and could not break the cage. She'd tried everything for a year, and it hadn't so much as flickered, and the one thing that kept the 3 of them holding on, down in that cold, was the same thought, passed between them in whispers. He'll come. That heartless little junior brother of ours. He'll miss us. He'll come. He definitely will, Jingfei told the other 2. Over and over. He definitely will. I did not know they were saying it. I only knew a divination and a direction, and I was moving toward them as fast as the world would let me, and the world had built a trap in the way, because someone had been following me the whole voyage. A figure in a golden cloak in a hidden manor, served by a man with an eagle's face, one of the ghost-faced demonic eagle clan, had tracked me every mile, and when the eagle man reported that I'd taken the bait and turned for the abyss, the golden cloak just said, "The fish is hooked. No one returns from the depths of the Hanming Sea abyss. Our part is done." The map, the summons, the whole road and engineered to walk me into a grave. I'd known something was wrong. I went anyway. What else is there when it's them? Ning Ruo and I crossed into the abyss, over a valley choked with bones and a gray mist that ate the air, and I shared a spicy rabbit leg with her because she turned out not to be a strict Buddhist at all, just a woman who loves scriptures because they quiet her, and the taste of it dropped me straight into a memory of the first meal my master ever cooked me, a roast rabbit leg on the road home after she pulled me out of the ash, the best thing I have ever eaten in my life, and the rabbit in my hand went to ash in my mouth because she was down there somewhere, and I threw it away and took Ning Ruo's hand and pushed our speed to the edge. The abyss did not want us to reach the middle. 100,000 water monkeys came out of the river with ice blades, and 5 giant ones with a crude 5 elements formation, and I cut the 5 apart and plowed through the rest, and the strangeness of it started to itch at me. Demon beasts thick inside what was supposedly human territory, exactly like that impossible ghost market. Ning Ruo felt it too. Maybe they weren't trying to keep us out, we realized. Maybe they were herding us in, and a mysterious summons only she could feel kept pulling her forward toward the exact place my master was, and neither of us could tell if it was a hand reaching out to help or a hook set in her destiny. 5 days in, past 100 Jiang waterfall, the truth of the place finally landed on me cold. This was no wild, forbidden zone. My sisters could never have wandered somewhere even Dao integration cultivators died. They'd been captured, carried in, caged, and if Yuan Hao's divination put my master with them, then master was caged too. This wasn't a place, it was a prison, and somewhere in it was the warden. Above the falls, the river split into 8 channels, and the map said, take the 3rd from the left, and we took it, 50 miles by spirit boat, and it dead-ended into a solid mountain that the map swore wasn't there, and when we turned around, the one path we'd come by had become 3 identical paths, an illusion array, heaven grade, that my clear mind couldn't see through and my full-power sword couldn't crack. Xiaoling told me, small-voiced, that she could break it, after 3 more months of digesting that crystal skull. The system offered to sell me a heaven-grade formation manual for 6 million luck, which I did not have, prompting my landlord's favorite genre of conversation, the one where it calls me dear host and then declines to help me for free. Selling my underwear wouldn't have covered it. So we sat down to wait, and I had Ning Ruo, a woman of luck, my 7th daughter of destiny, whether her heart knew it yet or not, pick one of the 3 channels at random, on the theory that luck is exactly her department. It looped us back. Of course it did. But when we sat again, she went very still, and then she said my name, my whole name, Luo Zhou, the first time she'd ever used it, and told me the summons wasn't ahead anymore. It was beneath us, directly under the water, and I made the call. Their soul lamps were lit, so the warden wasn't killing, which meant being caught for a while was survivable, and reaching master now beat breaking the maze in 3 months and burning my last hidden card to do it. Ning Ruo only said, Senior Yuan Hao and my master told me to obey you on this trip, and quieter, that she wasn't going to hold me back. So I took her hand, not to be shameless, for once, though she didn't believe that either, and we dove. Halfway down I saw it, a thread of colored silk light bleeding out of Ning Ruo's body toward a formation deep below. Her luck, being drawn out of her, the same as my sister's. I roared for her to surface, and it was already too late. A black hole opened in the riverbed with a great Tao suction that wanted her specifically, and it took us both down through a 6-pointed star array, tens of thousands of meters, and slammed us into a cold underground lake with a false river hanging overhead for a sky. The array came down after us, expanding 100-fold, pressing like a falling heaven. I held it off with the falling star swordplay, immortal holding the moon, my strongest form, and got Ning Ruo to point north toward the summons, and I ran that way with the sky trying to crush us both, and 100 miles ahead in the dark water I saw 3 figures. 3, 2 small ones and 1 holding them, and then 10,000 golden flying fish rose in a heaven tier. Array and loosed a divine soul attack, a thing you cannot block, 1,000 small knives inside the mind, and the Tao patterns on my nascent soul's brow flared gold and ate most of it off me, but Ning Ruo took it full, went paper white, shook, and endured it in total silence, jaw set, and I could not shield her, and the rage of that was its own kind of clarity. Because in that moment, I finally understood the whole machine. The colored mist is luck given a body. The warden imprisons women of luck to harvest it. That's why my master and my sisters were here. That's why Ning Ruo was summoned. And that's the same substance the system has been paying me in this entire time, which is a thought I put in the deepest drawer I have and slammed. I lit the Taichu swords Yin Yang Tu Chi, punched a hole through the fish, and broke for my family. And the 3 figures in the water lifted their faces and saw 2 dots racing at them out of the dark with a mountain-sized array in chase. And I heard, I will hear it when I die, my 5th sister's voice crack in half across 100 miles of cold water. Little junior brother? I dove into the middle of them. And the lake's luck net closed over all 5 of us, snared our legs, locked us in place, and the 6-pointed array, its prey finally caught, stopped attacking, and just hung overhead, patient. We couldn't move, but we were together, and they were alive. And I want to tell you about the next few minutes because they are the whole reason I do anything. Duan Jingfei looked at me and broke, not with joy, with grief. Because she'd wanted to see me every day and night for a year, and never, ever like this, in the one place there's no leaving. I'd rather have never seen you again in my life, she wept, than see you here. And Lan Qiusha, sharp Qiusha, who has called me heartless and idiot and stinky Luo Yan since I was small enough to bully, started scolding me. Are you an idiot? Don't you know your own limits? Playing the hero? And her voice got softer and softer the longer she cursed me until it just stopped, and she glared at me, red-eyed, out of words, and the cold water around us seemed, somehow, to warm a few degrees. I fed all 3 of them spiritual energy, and I was so full of a stupid, enormous joy that I nearly laughed out loud. Master and both sisters, alive and found, and I had to work not to, because the setting really was terrible for it. Master's eyes went to Ning Ruo, pressed against me by the array in a posture that made the Buddha maiden go crimson and start reciting a mantra, and I said one clean word about it and moved on, because some things you don't leer at. Ning Ruo introduced herself with perfect composure and no composure at all. Junior of the Liuli sect, greetings to senior and to both elder sisters, flustered for the first time in her life and not knowing why. And Bai Yongxi, 800 years old, looking at the philandering little disciple she'd been sure was a year in his grave, did some quiet math of her own, and understood that if we got out of here alive, she was going to have to keep a promise she'd made in a cave to a boy she thought was dying. And she blushed and looked away, and I saw all of it, and I thought, yes, master, yes you will. I checked my sisters the way I check everyone now, and the panels told me what a year of getting drained had cost, and what these 2 women actually were. Duan Jingfei, 330, a saint spirit immortal body that shares its gifts with the one she binds to. Lan Qiusha, 310, a 9 heavens immortal spirit body, marked by the system with 4 words I'd never seen it used before, destined to become an immortal, a thing no one in this whole realm has managed in 100,000 years. 2 more women of luck, which made 9 that I knew of, and I hadn't even started, and the machine in my chest was very, very quiet, the way it gets when it's looking at something too big to price. Qiusha caught me reading her, naturally, and threatened to marry me just so she could beat me daily for fun, and I told her she'd have to take it up with first senior sister, and she went quiet again, because fierce as she is, she's a little scared of Bai Xiun, and I filed that away with a century's worth of other ammunition. And Master's own panel, the one that had read 10% in a cave and 30 for a year, had quietly climbed while I wasn't looking, on nothing but a year of missing me, to 60%, and still pretending she felt nothing. I could have kissed the array for keeping my hands pinned, or I'd have given the game away grinning. So, there we all were. Reunited, alive, and sealed in a luck-eating prison at the bottom of a death abyss, the exit unknown, the warden unmet, and a 3-month clock ticking before I could even try to break the thing. It was, by any sane measure, a disaster. It was also the happiest I had been in 100 years. Both things, at the same time. That's just the shape of me. Now I only had to get us out. The formation, Master explained, locks your body completely for the first 3 months. Only in the 4th does it loosen enough to twitch. Which meant Ningruo could stop wasting spirit energy trying to peel herself off me, a losing battle she gave up with visible relief and a heart-cleansing mantra, and I could sit still, pinned to the Buddha maiden, keeping my body honest and my mind quiet, and finally ask my sisters the question that had haunted me for a year. How did you get here? The answer was short, and it turned my blood cold. A woman had taken them, face wrapped in a red silk scarf, strong past void refinement, and my master, at soul transformation, couldn't survive a single one of her moves before she was caught. The same summons that pulled Ningruo had pulled them, one by one, into a red-scarfed hand. Someone was farming Daughters of Destiny for their luck down here in the dark, and I was now inventory. So I asked the system what, exactly, I was sitting inside of, and it told me, the myriad heavens devouring luck grand formation, grown from luck, fed by luck, refining luck for its own use, and no ordinary formation breaking would so much as scratch it. Xiaoling couldn't crack the one below the lake even after her 3 months. She could only manage the array up top. The manual cost 6 million I didn't have. The Taichu sword couldn't do it unless I also happened to break into the next stage of soul transformation, which I couldn't rush. Every door was locked. I even, for one dark comic second, considered whether I could break the thing by playing cards with my master to pass the time, and killed the thought instantly, because whatever the formation demanded, I was not going to trample Bai Yongxi's dignity in front of everyone to do it. There's a line. It turns out I have one, so I did the only thing left. I sat, pinned in the dark, and I sank into the Tao scripture. The chaos tier technique the lone shark in my head had bankrupted me for, and I looked for an answer in the root of everything. And I found it. A single line. Heaven diminishes the abundant to supplement the lacking. Which begs a question the formation had never been asked. What happens if the thing is already full, and you pour luck into it madly, past the brim? Does it overflow? Does it burst? Xiaoling's eyes, when I put it to her, got very bright. Because my little sword had comprehended a formation of her own out of the yin-yang two qi, a thing called the two-essence microdust grand formation, and between my insight and her formation, we could do the impossible thing. We could break a formation with a formation. My toddler sword spirit is a formation prodigy, it turns out. I've never been prouder of anyone. By then it had been 3.5 months, and my family had quietly given up. Master had told the sisters to stop asking me about it, so as not to pile more weight on a boy who was clearly just trying to keep their spirits up. She'd made her peace. Perhaps we're fated to this calamity, and dying together isn't the worst way. And into that gentle surrender, I opened my eyes and said, I found a way out. There was a catch, and I told them straight, because I don't hide the price. The devouring formation could only be burst from the inside using the one bait it couldn't refuse, their own luck, their own destiny, poured in past its limit until it ruptured, and whether it worked or not, it would damage the foundation of their luck, permanently. I got about that far before my master cut me off. No need for the speech, she said. What do we do? All 3 of them nodding, not a flicker of hesitation, because I'd been reliable since I was 8 years old, and they'd decided long ago that whatever I said I could do, I could do. That trust is the most expensive thing anyone has ever given me, and I have never once been able to afford it. So we did it. The women gorged on the top-grade spirit stones I'd smuggled in, faces going from haggard to radiant, and took the 4 directions of a formation, earth, fire, water, wind, while I stood at the center and turned the yin-yang tu qi into its eye. A 7-colored diagram bloomed. The lake formation woke and opened a black hole to swallow it, and we rode that suction down into the true heart of the thing. It sat on a slab of blue stone the size of a courtyard, carved with golden runes, and I recognized part of the pattern, a map of the 28 constellations, a fragment of a celestial star diagram so vast the whole slab wasn't a 10,000th of it. Xiaoling linked in, the 4 women held their positions, and the star diagram fought back, drank their luck faster, and lashed all 5 of us with a backlash I have never felt the equal of. Fire in my master's meridians until her skin went red. Ice closing my 5th sister into a statue. Green wood trying to turn my 3rd sister into a tree. A soul-freezing flame gnawing at Ningruo's spirit. And every share of every one of their pains ran through me too, because I'd made myself the eye, and the eye feels everything. They didn't scream, not one of them. They set their jaws and they held, because I'd said this was the way out and that was enough for them, and I stood in the center wearing all four of their agonies and did not let my hands shake, because the one thing I could not afford was to fail the people who had decided, without evidence, that I never would. And then it got worse. 5 7-colored jade beads rose out of the stone, drank the flood of luck, and each grew a Tao pattern and a pressure so vast and so noble that even I, chaos divine demon body, soul transformation, 3 willow leaves and a god technique, felt my knees try to fold, felt the urge to kneel and let them decide whether I lived. My legs sank into solid rock. The beads did not touch the women. They crushed only me, harder and harder, as if I'd personally offended them. And the small seated figure at the core of me, my nascent soul, the one that had spoken in the massacre illusion and grown a sigil no one had ever seen, opened its eyes on its own. The Tao pattern on its brow blazed out of my body like a second sun, dispelled the pressure in an instant, and then reached out and ate the 5 jade beads whole. Absorbed them. Its golden strokes climbed from 16 to 20, its aura richer, and the whole thing happened faster than I could react, let alone stop. I stood there in a broken prison staring at my own soul, and understood, with a chill that had nothing to do with the ice, that whatever my primordial spirit is, it is not a normal cultivator's, that it has a will, a hunger, a budding self of its own. There's a path in the old stories where a cultivator with no future left splits off a piece of his soul into a second self, a clone with its own mind. It buys you a spare life, and it costs you the immortal road forever, and I will not walk it, because I, Luo Zhou, refuse to share the world with a second me. But that wasn't what this was. This was my own soul, growing something I never planted. I filed it under a folder I don't have a name for and don't like opening, and I got back to work because my family was still bleeding luck into a dying machine. Xiaoling reversed it. With the beads gone and the formation reeling, she turned the whole flood around, and all that stolen luck came pouring back into the 4 women, a year of theft repaid in one rush. Their gaunt faces filled. Their auras didn't just recover, they surged, 30% past where they'd started, and I finally understood why every woman of luck I'd ever met was heartbreakingly beautiful. It would be against nature for them not to be. 3 hours the luck poured back, and then the blue stone cracked, and the myriad heavens devouring luck grand formation, the thing that had drowned my master for a year, broke. Lan Qusha, restored to full strength, wrapped me on the head with a knuckle and told me to stop spacing out and break the one up top too. And for 1 second, she was 900 miles and 100 years away, home at the sect, bullying her little junior brother, and I loved her so much I couldn't speak. So I broke the top array with a single sword, and the false river sky came down like a collapsed Milky Way, and we rose up out of a death that had held my family for a year, free. And a cold, furious voice arrived on the wind. Who destroyed my grand formation? You're courting death. The warden, finally. A towering woman in black war gear, a red silk scarf hiding her face, light gold hair, an ancient weathered bronze mace at her hip, and enough swagger to face 5 of us alone without a flicker of fear. I put my family behind me and told them to stand clear. This one's mine, and I meant it as more than protection. I'd wanted to meet the hand that took them for a year, and here it was. We fought, and it was the first even fight I'd had in longer than I could remember. My casual sword, the Tai Chu, the one that suppresses a realm, the one no mid-stage void refinement cultivator should be able to survive. She met with that ancient mace and only gave a step. The mace was the thing. It lifted her a full realm above herself, offsetting Xiaoling's suppression exactly. She was early void refinement under it, and she covets, of course, my sword. Your blade is extraordinary, she said, delighted. In the middle of trying to cave in my skull, I want it. But I have the chaos divine demon body, and in a pure contest of strength I have never once bent my knee, and stroke by stroke I ground her back, a stagger in her step, her mace hand starting to shake, the first time in her life I'd bet that anyone had outmuscled her head on. She screamed at me to drop the weapon and fight her hand to hand, and I told her I don't wrestle bears, and she got angrier, and finally she pulled a small bone flute and blew it, calling in whatever she keeps in the dark for exactly this. And that was my cue to leave, because I'm not a fool. I had what I'd come for. I couldn't kill her fast on her own ground, and I wasn't going to gamble my just-freed family on a grudge. So I swept up all 4 women and went, and I did not go quietly. I told her I had 4 peerless beauties to travel with, and no interest in staying to entertain a masked monster who wouldn't even show her face, which enraged her enough that she flung a parting mace blow 100 miles after us, and I swatted it aside without looking, because a man should have some style about his exits. She swore she'd kill me one day. I told the dark, quietly, that one day I'd come back and empty every cage she has, because that's the other thing about the folder that never loses a name. It doesn't only keep the people I owe, it keeps the ones who owe me. And the red-scarfed warden of the Hanming Sea Abyss had just written herself into it, right under the Jin family, right under the thing that killed my clan. I'd walked into a hole in the world to pull my master out of a year of drowning, and I'd done it. Now I just had to get her home. And on the way, it turned out, there was one more debt to collect. A small one, a child-sized one, and it was going to make me kill a princess. Remember Xiao Kui, the herb-selling girl Ning Ruo took as her first disciple, the one who called me grandmaster and wasn't wrong enough for me to correct her. We'd left her and her mother safe in a mortal village while we went into the abyss. We came back to find the village occupied. A pampered woman sat in the courtyard fanning the peasant air away from her nose, 2 maids behind her, and 4 white-haired void refinement elders sitting cross-legged in the corners like immortals for hire. And in a dark room they'd been holding Xiao Kui and her mother, the girl terrified, the mother hurt and too weak to rise, as bait. I'm going to leave it at that because the details are the kind of thing I don't put in a story, and because the fact is enough, they'd hurt a child and her sick mother to draw me back. The woman was the daughter of a man named Guo An, a void refinement elder of the Boundary Sea Trade whom I'd killed at the coast on the way in when he tried to execute me for the steward Song Bo and reach for Ning Ruo besides. She was, by marriage, a concubine of the Jin family's 3rd young master, and she'd come for private revenge because her husband had forbidden any open Jin strike, since an open strike would shame the family's name, and so she'd assembled 4 hired void refinement elders to do it quietly instead. The elders, for the record, privately thought her dead father had deserved it. They were only there for the 3rd young master's face. That's the whole texture of these people. Not one of them believed they were in the right. They just believed they were strong enough not to have to be. I walked into the courtyard, and I asked the 4 hired elders to leave, once, and they laughed and leered at the 4 women behind me, and one of them crooked a finger and told me to come up and die. And whatever thin thread of restraint I'd been holding, the one that says don't make more enemies of the Jin family than you have to, I let it go because the moment they looked at my master and my sisters like that, they stopped being a political problem and became a chore. The Taichu sword suppressed all 4 of them a full realm at once. They were stunned. Then they were throwing out their treasures. A golden turtle shell the size of a house, a jade ruler, a bone umbrella, a spear and shield like some ancient soldier. And I gave them terms, mostly to watch them refuse. Leave every treasure, and the woman dies. They refused, and reached for the biggest name they had. Do you know who she is? The pillow companion of the 3rd Master Jin. Kill her, and you go to war with the whole Jin family. No one can protect you. I counted down from 10. I've found that a countdown does something to proud people. It makes them certain, right up until it makes them dead. They called my bluff at 10, and at 9, and at 3, sure I'd never dare defy the closest thing the human race has to a king. At 1, I lit the yin-yang 2 chi, and a black and white fish the size of the sky rolled over them and broke the wall of light they threw up together and split into 4 swords, and 4 void refinement elders did not get up, and not one of their nascent souls escaped. They accepted my terms at the very end, when it was much too late to matter, which is the way it usually goes. The woman I caught, she fell to her knees and wept and tried to beg and bribe her way loose, and I bound her and set her down and did the thing I actually think might matter more than any of the killing. I called Xiao Kui over, and I asked her, the 9-year-old, the herb seller, the girl who'd watched these people terrorize her mother, how she wanted this handled. She thought about it seriously, glaring at the woman, and asked me the real questions, one at a time. If you kill her, will her husband come for you? Maybe, I said. Can you beat him if he does? Not always. It depends who he brings. And if we let her go, will he come anyway? Yes, I said, because people like this measure everything in face, and having lost some to us, they must take it back or die. So the girl nodded, slow and certain, and I told her the only lesson I have that's worth teaching a child in this world. For bad people, for your enemies, you must never once be too kind. Then I covered her eyes so she wouldn't have to watch, and the princess and her maids were gone, and I said, let's go home. I know how that sounds. I'm not going to soften it. This world runs on might making right, and I've spent 300 years hating that, and I have also learned exactly one way to protect the people I love inside it, and it isn't kindness to the ones who'd cage a child. Xiao Kui will grow up strong and warm, and I hope never have to do what I did in that courtyard, but she'll know it can be done. That's the inheritance I actually have to give. The rumor of it shook the whole continent within days, and, this is the funny part, the knife almost a spoon part again, it shook it in our favor. Because the story that spread wasn't Luozhou murdered a Jin daughter-in-law, it was that a woman impersonating the Jin family, whose dead father had tried to make the West's beloved Buddha maiden his concubine, had gathered killers to ambush the #1 prodigy of the whole Qingyun continent and been wiped out for it. Everyone agreed she deserved it, because by now I was the #1 prodigy of the whole continent, my old battle in the central continent long since legend, the Academy Dean himself rumored to want me for a disciple, and a nobody like that impersonating the Jin family and reaching for the Buddha maiden? Who wouldn't die for that? The real Jin family, of course, did not find it funny. In a jade hall far to the north, a refined young man in silk shattered a vase and roared for his 6 great guest elders to accompany him to the Qingyun continent to wipe out the sect that had killed his concubine. Jin San Gongzi, the 3rd young master, coming personally for me. Which is how the last piece of this fell into place, because he came to the one place on the continent where I'd just been offered a home I hadn't yet decided to take. I brought my master and my sisters home to the Ascension Dao Academy, and for one afternoon the whole family was under one sky. Bai Xiun and Lin Yuexi and Lan Xuanji, and the newly freed 3, Master, Jingfei, Qiusha, and Ningruo and Xiaokui, all of them in one courtyard, and I stood in the middle of it feeling like the luckiest man who ever cheated his way out of a grave. My 5th sister and my fiancé bonded instantly over a shared love of wine and a shared interest in my flaws. My gentle 3rd sister watched everyone with quiet warmth. Even my master, who'd spent a year expecting to die, sat in the sun and let herself be teased. There was a gift waiting for me too. My 2nd senior sister Lin Yuexi pressed a jade pendant into my hand, a mid-grade defensive sacred artifact, the kind of thing the whole eastern region hadn't owned a single one of a year ago, and told me it came from the elder Shen's sister, Shen Qingwan, 23 and fully recovered now, alive because a fruit had reached her in time. She and Little Spirit had traveled all the way from the Shenki continent to thank me in person and missed me by a hair and left the pendant and a letter and a standing invitation. Shen Shuiyun's handwriting was careful and childish and serious all at once, and it made my chest hurt in the good way. 14 years old, my little sister in everything but blood, and her real sister was alive to see her grow up. That's a debt I paid that paid me back tenfold, and it's the only kind of ledger I ever actually want to keep. Qiusha naturally seized on the letter to accuse me of collecting yet another woman, and I had to explain that Little Spirit is a child and my friend and nothing else in this world or any other, which is true and which I will say to anyone who asks and several who don't. And Lan Xuanji waved the whole jealousy off with the pact she'd made me long ago. She won't object to any woman who matches us in talent and character and heart. And then Sword Sister to the bone, muttered that she'd only managed to hold her own against me for 2 hours in their last spar, and intended to last a great deal longer next time, which is the single most Sword Saintess sentence I have ever heard, and I adore her for it. Ningruo, meanwhile, was reporting the whole journey to the Academy Dean and to her own master, and when she got to the part about the Jin family, the Dean of the Ascension Dao Academy, Yuan Hao, the old schemer, the only Hadao cultivator on the continent, didn't so much as blink. He told me plainly, "Don't worry about the Jin family. Even if you'd killed a true-born Jin instead of a hired imposter, as long as you're in the right, the Dao Academy doesn't fear them in the slightest. Our founder is Tian Guang. We protect the prodigies of the human race, whether they've joined us or not." And I felt something move in my chest, because he still hadn't made joining a condition. He just meant it. Then Jin San Gongzi arrived to test exactly how much he meant it. He came in style, a carriage pulled by 4 winged sky feather horses, rare beyond price, 6 white-haired guest elders flying escort, and he drove that carriage straight through the ancient stopgate where every honored guest in the Academy's history has dismounted to walk up the mountain out of respect. An arrogance so complete it was almost a kind of art. And Yuan Hao, displeased, sent his own senior disciple Zhao Heng down to welcome them and told him not to hold back. Zhao Heng cut all 4 priceless horses out of the air with a single stroke, as casually as a man trimming a hedge, and the whole Jin party went very quiet. The fop got out of his broken carriage screaming about war with the Jin family, and Zhao Heng looked at him and asked what exactly a nascent soul ant thought it was going to declare war with. Their leader, a Dao harmonization elder named Shu Changzhou, laid out their demand, hand over Luo Zhou, the culprit, and Zhao Heng laid out the truth right back. Your Boundary Sea Department threatened and insulted an Academy disciple. Your 4 hired elders kidnapped mortals and ambushed my junior brother. So which of your dead do you imagine we owe you an apology for? 12 of the Academy's Void Refinement elders drifted down and ringed the Jin party in a loose, terrible circle. Jin Yufeng, cornered, tried the only move his kind of man ever has. He looked at the peerless women standing near me, and he decided he could simply have them and offered to recruit me. Pledge yourself to the Jin family, and all this is forgiven, a guest elder's rank, past grievances wiped clean. For the women. I'd been threatened by better men than him that same year, and I asked him, with real curiosity, whether he was looking to eat something unpleasant. The smile froze on his face. When he tried to threaten me one more time, I told him, enunciating it so there'd be no confusion, that if he said one more word I would kill him where he stood, and he felt the killing intent come off me and discovered all at once that he was standing very close to the man who'd single-handedly killed 4 void refinement elders, and he chose wisely to swallow it. Above us, meanwhile, Yuan Hao and Shu Changzhou had taken their quarrel into the void, and it was a Dao harmonization clash, the kind of thing that makes the sky go black and the clouds spit lightning and looks, from below, like a small planet quietly detonating. It did not last long. A disheveled figure fell out of the dark and smashed into a distant peak, and it was Shu Changzhou and Yuan Hao, who it turned out was a great deal more than the early Dao harmonization elder everyone had him pegged for, drifted back to the gate and told the Jin boy to go home and tell his elders to entertain fewer improper thoughts, or next time the academy wouldn't be so polite. Shu Changzhou, wiping his mouth, realized the dean had been hiding his true depth the whole time and left in a hurry, and the fop and his broken carriage and his dead horses went with him, and the Jin family, the closest thing the human race has to a throne, went home from the Ascension Dao Academy with nothing. And then Yuan Hao took me aside and finally told me the truth he'd been circling since the first invitation. The academy, he said, faces a coming crisis. A catastrophe he'd burned his own lifespan to divine, and could barely read. Ancient willow, dragon scales, 13 numbers of Xuanji, a single thread of spring. Humanity pushed to the edge of survival. And in every divination he'd cast, there was exactly one sliver of a chance that the whole thing could be turned aside by me. That's why the academy had crossed a continent for a masked stranger, not for my talent, for a thread of spring and a dark prophecy with my face at the center of it. I told him I might know what the ancient willow was. And I opened my hand, and there was a jade willow leaf lying on it, humming with a great Dao aura that made a Hedao immortal's hands shake. And I showed him a vision of the thing it came from, a willow branch the size of the sky descending over the world, and he understood at last that the boy he'd been chasing had walked out of a demon holy land with a piece of a prophecy in his pocket without even knowing what he held. He gripped my arm and called me the child of destiny, the one who could turn misfortune to fortune for the whole academy, for the whole human race. And he made his offer, and this time it wasn't a leash. Join not as a student, but as his junior brother. His own master had already agreed. I'd become a grand elder of the inner academy the day I accepted, with the best of everything and no restrictions at all, and he'd match me to Ning Ruo and pour resources into every woman I loved, and the Jin family would never again be able to touch me in the open. I'm not a fool. Before I'm strong enough to stand entirely on my own, a tree that big is worth standing under, and it cost me nothing I valued, since joining the academy didn't cost me my sect. So I bowed, and I stopped being coy, and I said the words, "Luozhou greets senior brother Yuan Hao." He laughed like a delighted old man, and then, because I asked, he told me who our shared master was, Tian Guang, the founder of the Dao Academy, one of the 3 great masters who crossed the tribulation 100,000 years ago and held the human race on their shoulders, Luo Wuchen's peer, Jin Longshan's peer. And now, if the words I'd just spoken meant anything, my own master's master, which made me the 7th and youngest disciple of a living legend, the little junior brother of men who ran Dao academies across whole continents. I stood there with my mouth open, 300 years old, and floored like a child, and Yuan Hao enjoyed every second of it, because I'd shocked him a dozen times that year, and he'd finally gotten to shock me back. So let me leave you where the year left me, because it's a good place to stand and look back from. 1 year ago, I was a cripple. 100 years of being called trash, a lifespan burned down to its last inch, a dying boy tossed 2,000 coins by the family that was supposed to love him and told to disappear before sunrise. And now I stood on the sacred mountain at the heart of the continent as the junior brother of Tian Guang, a soul transformation cultivator at 300. The #1 prodigy of the whole Qingyun world, with my master pulled back from a year of drowning and my whole strange family under one sky and a piece of heaven's own prophecy warm in my hand. From 2,000 coins to the child of destiny, I did the arithmetic the way I always do, and for once the numbers just made me quiet. Xiaokui found me before I left, healed and rosy in a pretty dress, and asked if I'd come visit her someday, and I promised her I would, and I meant it. And when she smiled up at me, I saw a little sister I lost a lifetime ago and had to look away. That's the warm thread. It's always there if you look. But I want to be honest with you, the way I've been honest the whole time, because you've earned it and because I don't know how to be anything else. I closed 1 year, and I did not close the story. There's a woman named Li Mingyu torn out of the world into the demon realm, rising like a phoenix somewhere I'll have to walk into hell to reach, and I told her I'd come. There's a red-scarfed warden at the bottom of an abyss with cages I swore I'd empty. There's an old ancestor buried on an immortal's island who told me not to come until I reach a height no one's touched in 100,000 years, and I'm going to reach it. There's a Jinn family that just went home humiliated and does not forget. There's a purple-haired goddess in a vision with my women standing cold behind her, and a prophecy of 13, and a shadow that murdered my entire clan in a single night and has never once answered for it. And under all of it, quiet as a held breath, a debt of 10 billion in my own skull, and a machine that turns love into the currency I owe, a machine that runs, I finally let myself understand, on the exact same luck that a red-scarfed woman farms out of caged girls in the dark, which is a thought I have put in a drawer and will one day have to open. So no, it isn't over, it's barely started. But I'm not a cripple counting down to a grave anymore. I'm Luo Zhou, 7th disciple of Tian Guang, and I have a family to keep, a girl to pull out of hell, an ancestor to bring home, and a very long list of people who are going to wish they'd never written their names in my folder. Ask me in 100 years how it turned out. I intend to be around to tell you.